Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto is neglected by family akame ga kill. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by 10,000 future Naruto and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Perspective. Naruto Uzumaki Konoha's biggest knucklehead shinobi and the pronounced demon brat sat in Ichiraku's raiment stand with the sound of rain and thunder in the background. No other customers were willing to enter while the demon brat was around, not even the shinobi. Naruto didn't mind though, having already been used to the discrimination over the years. Rather, he focused on something else. It wasn't all that surprising seeing Naruto in such a state, spacing out and eyes void of life, after all many horrifying acts have been done onto him time and again during his 9-year life. He survived the beatings, the whispers and the constant destruction of his belongings and household. He even adapted to these by carrying what he owned in his pockets. From anyone watching over him, it would come as a surprise that he hadn't already snapped and lost all sense of reasoning. Instead, people outside Konoha would see another innocent, cheerful boy with a dream to become Hokage. That, however, was all at risk. Currently, we find Naruto mulling over prior events that only transpired a few hours ago. This on top of the horrible week he had been having so far was speculation for concern. His problems started with the loss of someone that actually cared for him, however today's revelations have maxed out what little perseverance he had of the village, his mental fortitude forever scarred. Flashback. Naruto awoke to no water or electricity due to the landlord cutting them off and demanding payment for his stay or to leave his property, something he had no choice but to disagree to. His accommodation was already been set too high with him being special that, and compared to what little income he received left him with little to nothing to work with. Sometimes Naruto would starve, and the only reason he hadn't done so yet was due to Ayame and her father providing cheaper and sometimes free food in their stand. Those two people were the closest to him right now, and he cared for them deeply. He truly cared for them, and if push came to shove he wouldn't mind giving his life to them in gratitude. Following the disagreement to the start of the new day, an Anbu agent eventually called Naruto to Sarutobi's office. He proceeded to get a new set of clothes and looked scurried through his cupboard for anything to wear, having noticed how ragged, ugly and dirty his clothes were. He always liked orange, but as a ninja and training it was something simply couldn't wear. As much as he wanted something else better, it was the only thing the civilians would sell to Naruto in their pitiful attempts to get him killed. Naruto knew what happened to his clothes, as it was common throughout his life. He always locked the door, but on occasion the landlord would open it up and let people inside to trash his apartment. It was the sole reason why his apartment was barely livable, being full of holes, broken windows and deplorable furniture. To add insult to the injury, he was required to pay it since he damaged the property or would be kicked out just like the other apartments he stayed at. After attaining the best jumpsuit he could find, Naruto proceeded to the Hokage's office, ignoring the stares and whispers sent his way. Storm clouds gathered overhead, but Naruto paid no attention to the sudden change in weather. Naruto wouldn't notice till later how painful the storm would be, adding insult to his injury. After making his way to the Hokage tower, bypassing all the glares and whispers, Naruto was greeted by Sarutobi outside, a rare occurrence since meetings usually took place in his office. Naruto analyzed him and noticed his sad facial expression, seeing pain and guilt-ridden eyes. Naruto decided it was best not to question him on the issue and chalked it up to work and stress, since it wasn't the only time he was sad. As old age was getting to him. Sarutobi looked at Naruto as he worked overtime to get his mood back in order. He began by questioning him on his progress with his education in the Ninja Academy, but that was a terrible attempt to do so, as he knew the truth and that Naruto wasn't making much progress due to the bias of teachers working against him, having already resulted in him failing once before. To top it off, Iruka, the only teacher that respected Naruto, was killed by Mizuki in the scroll incident while he watched on. Sure, Naruto had won utilizing a vast amount of shadow clones, returning the favor to the traitor through slow torture, but the damage was done. Naruto, the bright and cheerful child, hadn't returned to his normal state all week and was lost and confused. One wrong move would set him off, and Sarutobi didn't want to see that happen. Naruto in the end replied to Sarutobi's question, stating that his education was improving, but his usual cheerfulness was void from his words. Naruto noticed Sarutobi sigh and accept the answer and proceeded to follow him to his office and get the meeting over and done with. On the way, his Jiji would apologize profusely on what would transpire, even if he had no idea what was going on. It couldn't be as bad as things already were, right? It took only a minute for them to arrive at the office, and Sarutobi specifically told him to keep an open mind, with his voice still full of remorse. He hoped that one day Naruto would forgive him or at least understand what he did and why. Slowly and cautiously he opened the door, knowing that this event would forever scar him in the young child's eyes. The duo walked into the office and was greeted to the side of the yondaime, the yellow flash of Konoha, and Naruto's prior hero sitting on the cage seat, along with a woman and two kids by his right. He noticed the features of the females. First, the older woman had noticeable long red hair going down to her waist and held one of the children who bore great resemblance to her and looked at him with curious innocent eyes. The final female in the room, who was most likely around his age, surprisingly looked like his Warwick no Jutsu except younger, with two pigtails, sun-kissed blonde hair, and was detailed even down to the whisker marks on her cheeks. It made him slightly happy that there was someone else out there that bore similar features to him, however that excitement was not likely to last with the news that followed. Naruto was astounded to find the fourth Hokage alive and well, with what he assumed was his family standing by him. He wondered what was going on and what this had to do with this. Sure, he was honored and all, having been called up personally, but why signal him out? Was it because he sealed the Kyuubi into him? Did he want to finish the job like the villagers wanted? That thought scared Naruto. The following interaction would be similar to Project Train's story for the love of family. IPM''d him and got permission. Ah. Naruto, I'm glad you're here, Minato said with a foxy grin similar to Naruto's own. Look at you, so handsome already. You have your father's looks alright. The redheaded woman gushed. Father? Naruto slowly registered, unsure where the conversation was going. As far as he knew, he was an orphan and his parents had died during the Kyuubi incident. Did these people know my parents? Were they friends? Was the primary thought going through his head. Sure, he was a bit unsure why the Kyuubi was sealed into him in the first place, but maybe the reason was his parents and they were close. What was said next was not what he expected, and as if Kami was watching the scenes unfold, she matched the suspense with rain and thunder. That's right, son. I told you he'd take after me, didn't I, Kushina? Minato said, looking at his wife and ignoring the sudden storm in the background. TCH. Whatever, he still has my face, Kushina playfully jabbed, unaware of the grave mistake their antics just made. As if trying to clarify the situation, Sarutobi spoke up. Naruto, I'm sure you're familiar with the Yondaime Hokage, and this is Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. They are your parents. He began slowly to ensure he fully understood what they meant. Unsure if this was the right way to go about things. Naruto stood there in shock for a long time, being unable to fathom the situation. He was extremely quiet, almost showing no signs of breathing, which worried his parents and siblings. Sachi? Are you okay? Kushina asked, looking at her son in worry. Naruto didn't respond, instead looked down with hair bangs covering his eyes. Now I know what you must be thinking. How come it took us this long to come home? Well, with Jiraiya and Tsunade taking care of you, we figured we'd wait a while and train Naruto a bit more. Why, I bet those two Sannin had been beating you to the ground with how serious they were when it came to training. Oh yes. I'd like you to meet your two sisters. Minato said cheerfully, trying to lighten the mood as he motioned to the older sister by his mother's side and the younger sister in the arms of Kushina. Is that Naruto Nyasan? The little girl asked her older sister softly as Kushina gently rocked her side to side. Yes, Narumi-chan. That's a Nyasan, Naruko replied warmly to her little sister. Hello, Naruto Nyasan. I'm Naruko and I'm your younger twin. This is Narumi and she's the youngest of us. I've wanted to meet you for a long time now, Nyasan, and I'm so happy and honored to finally meet you, Naruko said as she smiled warmly at her brother and bowed. Naruto still didn't respond and just looked at the floor, unable to think or look at the family he had missed out on. Still, they ignored his lack of reaction and continued. Haha. They've always wanted to meet you ever since we told them they had an older brother. Gosh, it seemed like yesterday when the Kaiu. That's enough, Minato. Sarutobi cut in. He understood Minato's excitement in seeing his son after all the years he staged his death, leaving Naruto in the hands of Tsunade and Jiraiya, but Minato didn't know of what happened. Well, he left Naruto at the mercy of vengeful villagers who despised the demon brat. Naruto had only recently found out about his tenant, who is linked to his own life in the most horrid way possible, and the more Minato continued on, the greater the grave he dug. He doubted their cheery approach they took to the situation was helping Naruto at all, and was likely having the opposite effect. What is it, Sarutobi? Minato asked. I told you to hear me out before you did anything, but did you listen? No. You have no idea what you've done. You and Kushina have. What are you talking about, Sarutobi? Kushina questioned, unsure what the problem was. So you know them, Sarutobi-sama, Naruto asked, not moving his attention away from the floor. Naruto understood now, he couldn't trust Sarutobi. He had lied to him all these years, and what's worse, he's been putting up with this crap all his life. Sarutobi flinched at the sudden respect change Naruto gave to him, yet still he replied, yes, Naruto, I know Minato and Kushina, and I can't begin to express how sorry I am for not telling you, he spoke sadly. It was clear that Naruto no longer trusted him, and he wouldn't be surprised if he hated him. Hell, he hated himself right now. He only knew about Minato and Kushina's disappearance after the Kyuubi attack, with a letter stating that Minato had trusted Jiraiya and Tsunade to look after as his godparents, especially when they were the best teachers around to protect and train Naruto to control the entirety of the Kyuubi. They on the other hand needed to maintain secrecy to gain an edge against the masked man and train Naruto to prepare for the inevitable battle. This separate training would optimize the amount of knowledge they can cover for the twins, and the village would grow stronger as a result. They believed this was the best way to strengthen the will of fire, the fire that burns with strength and determination. He couldn't say anything because it was an S-rank secret, sweetie, Kushina cooed, hoping to get her son to look at them. And I'm sure you know all about that since you're in the ninja academy, if what I read is correct, Minato said, looking at a paper. Minato, we really need to talk. These are not happy times and I'm sorry things didn't go the way you hoped all those years ago. Sarutobi said, looking at Naruto in sadness. Am I free to go? Sarutobi-sama, Naruto asked emotionlessly. But Sachi. Yes, you're free to go, and for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Sarutobi continued, ignoring the furious look Kushina sent his way as Naruto left the office, not bothering to dignify his apology. Naruto had left the office and walked down the stairs, limping towards the exit in a daze. It was raining heavily with the occasional thunderclap going off, yet Naruto continued to walk out, ignoring it all. It was raining heavily and nobody was around. The ground was slippery with mud, but Naruto paid no mind. He was mulling over what had happened and felt sad and sick every time he thought over it. He subconsciously made his way to Ichiraku's ramen, hoping to clear his mind with ramen. Flashback end. Naruto stared down his bowl of ramen, which was given to him on the house, simply because AM noticed that he was especially sad today. AM took this opportunity to talk to him over the counter. She always liked Naruto and saw him as a cheerful little brother, regardless of the horrible life he lived, and seeing him at such a state really tore at her. At first their relationship was a customer to worker, however as time moved on with the more frequent visits from Naruto, they got to know each other more. This was mainly brought about because of the rumors of the demon brat and what life he lived. AM didn't see Naruto as any form of demon, but instead saw an innocent child caught up in the hate of the world. For that she took it upon herself to watch over him when she could, along with her father. They tried adopting him. However, Naruto refused in order to keep them safe. She understood where he was coming from and appreciated his resolve, but it didn't mean she had to like it. She wished the villagers would see him for who he was, not what he contained. AM decided to take some time off since no one else was likely to come, and took the opportunity to talk to Naruto to find out what was wrong. Naruto, what's wrong? You haven't touched your bowl of ramen and that isn't like you. You usually have eaten 4 by now. She giggled slightly at the memory of his addiction. There was silence between them for a good minute, with the only sound of rain and thunder in the background. Then, "Some things happened," was his lacking response. Naruto continued to stare down at the full ramen bowl, eyes void of emotion and the cheerfulness they usually held. AM was happy, he replied, but was not satisfied till she knew more. She spoke up once again. What happened? You usually tackle problems in front of you with a smile on your face, what's got you so upset? Is it the villagers again? I swear those bastards will get what's coming to them eventually. Another long pause before Naruto responded in trust. My parents were alive and I was abandoned. He replied, emotionally stunted. AM didn't respond for a while, unsure on how to comprehend the situation. She didn't know what to say and clearly understood his reason for being depressed. She wouldn't even know how to react if that happened to her, on top of all the abuse the villagers pushed onto him. Regardless, she responded. Naruto, I can't begin to understand what you're going through on top of everything else, but to me you're on one of the strongest people I know. No matter what, you always face your problems head on with a smile. You're cheerful and fun no matter what has happened, and to me that's what makes you different and special from the rest. Don't ever let your problems change you for the worst. Hate is a terrible emotion that will destroy you. I don't want that to ever happen to you. Naruto didn't respond at first till a small smile graced his face and he began eating his bowl of ramen. He wasn't hungry at all, and all he really wanted right now was someone familiar to help him get through this mess. Big sis, thank you. AM smiled at that and began humming as she continued to clean the dishes. Naruto didn't eat much, but to make him feel better, AM and his father gave him the ramen on the house. Still, Naruto was unsure how to proceed. He thought over the pain, the abuse and betrayal, and was at a loss in what to do next. He didn't want to stay in the village anymore, and he didn't owe the people his loyalty except for AM and her father. Haruka was the only other person he came to care about, especially from his dying confession of caring for him like a brother. However, he was dead, killed before could truly make the connection. His Jiji or Sarutobi-sama had lied to him on something very important, and that destroyed his image of a grandfather in his eyes. Finally he had no friends since everyone stayed away from him or made fun of him, even his rival Satsuki, who he challenged daily hoping to get stronger, wasn't entirely a friend and at times joined in, but still being less pronounced than the rest. No one cared for him and he doubted she or anyone else would miss him if he disappeared. After mulling over his thoughts, Naruto decided he had to leave the village. There was nothing here except the two in front of him, and AM was right in a way, if he stayed here he would likely change for the worst, and he didn't want to constantly be surrounded by horrid people. He decided it was best he found somewhere new to call home, where he was wanted and could be of use. Somewhere he could start fresh without having a bias identity against him as the demon of Konoha. The two people in front of him were the only people to say goodbye to. He knew they cared for him deeply and hopefully would understand his intentions for leaving. It was going to be sad saying goodbye to them, possibly forever, but if he could pay them back for their love and support he would. Naruto called both AM and her father to focus on what he was going to say next. It was late and getting dark with the thunderstorm raging overhead, yet he knew this was his only chance to leave and escape without being tracked. The people of Konoha would be far too busy preparing for the return of the Yondaime and would be too preoccupied to notice his disappearance. If he didn't leave now he would be monitored carefully as his son, something he didn't want, so now was the only chance he had left. Naruto prepared himself to tell them his plan. AM, old man Tucci, he paused trying to come up with the right words to say to them. I have decided tonight I will be leaving Konoha. There was silence for a minute, accompanied by the occasional thunderclap in the background and the pouring rain. Then. Naruto. Where will you go? As bad as this place is, you at least have a roof over your head. Out there it's dangerous, bandits, killers, thieves, it's no place for a child. AM responded, shocked at the sudden development. Before Naruto could speak up, Tucci spoke next, also surprised. As much as I can see where you're coming from, there is currently a thunderstorm overhead and it's raining. What if you're caught? You would get into a lot of trouble and I don't think Hokage-sama would let you out of his sight willingly. Tucci finished trying to comprehend the ramifications of such an act. He understood completely that Naruto had a better shot outside of Konoha, but going now without a plan was extremely stupid and dangerous. Naruto responded with confidence and slight cheerfulness in his voice, most likely at the prospect of a new future and the fresh option available to him. I thought it over and over. I owe these people nothing and they don't deserve my respect. I am actually more prepared than you think. The rain will cover my scent and tracks, while the thunder would increase my stealth by blocking out the sound of my movements. I have little to carry as I don't own much, and to top it off I know a secret way out of Konoha. He paused dramatically before continuing. No one will notice me gone until it is too late. I am the demon brat after all and no one would care. AM and Tucci continued to argue with Naruto, but in the end agreed with him that the only way he would have a shot at life was to find somewhere new to take it. With a heavy sigh, Naruto said his goodbyes and pulled out his wallet to pay for his meals. There's no need, my boy, Tucci said. Consider it a gift. Also, I have something in the back I wanted to give to you for your birthday. I know it's early, but it's now or never, give me a second to get it for you. Tucci left to collect the items for Naruto to take on his journey. AM went around the counter and gave Naruto a big long hug. We're really going to miss you. Don't ever forget about us, and if you're in any trouble, we'll always be here to support you. Naruto's eyes watered at the idea of leaving them behind. Thanks AM. You're the best big sister anyone can ask for. They continued to talk, spending what little time they had together till Tucci came back with the items in hand. Naruto analyzed the items and was surprised with what he was carrying. He saw a large and expensive storage scroll designed to last and absorb impact, along with several ninja books and scrolls, which included chakra theory, combat styles, jutsu and fuinjutsu. Naruto was surprised they were able to accumulate such material, let alone so much. He couldn't help but voice his confusion. Where did you get all of that? He asked, surprised at the items. These are presents from us and what Iruka wanted to give to you for your upcoming birthday. He left it with us to mind and present it to you when the time was right and called it a hunch, and I guess he was right. This has more use with you than anyone else. Use them wisely. He spoke while handing over the items. Here's some ryo, money or whatever, for the journey, buy what you need on the way, and finally always remember to live life to the fullest and don't ever let it change who you are. Thanks for everything. I swear I will take care of it, thank you for everything. Naruto finished, slightly crying at all they did for him and the fond memories he shared with them. Now he couldn't make those memories anymore. It was time for him to go, so finally he said his goodbyes. 10 minutes later. Naruto traveled down to his shabby apartment in the rain with his new storage scroll securely tied on his back and the books and jutsu scrolls sealed inside. He was still depressed over the events that transpired throughout the day with the return of his family, but he was now more accepting of the situation and happy he got to spend his last few moments in Konoha with AM and Tucci. Now he was completely resolved to leave, but first he had to collect what supplies he could from his apartment, such as any clothes and food he could use for the journey. Naruto arrived at his apartment and noticed that all his belongings were outside. He wasn't happy with the landlord for being such an ass, but at least he left it outside instead of in the trash, as it would make his escape harder, smelling like garbage. Looking on the bright side and the potential for a new and bright future, he scavenged through his belongings, taking out what he needed such as food, mainly ramen, blankets, matches, cooking pans, clothes and more, and sealed them into his newly acquired storage scroll. For the rest of his stuff he left it there since there was no need to bring it with him. He was going to travel first and see the world before settling down again. He analyzed some of the items he collected. He equipped what little ninja gear he presently had, such as dull pre-owned kunai and shuriken, while looking at the state of his clothing. From what he could tell, he would need to buy better clothes first, then proper equipment. It was risky, but he needed to stop by a ninja store and stock up on equipment. He had to do it early to avoid detection, so as soon as he left Konoha and make his way out to the port city of Taki. It was night time, and while the rain had died down, Naruto still made his way out of Konoha through an underground passage he found. It was flooded and muddy, but so far it was a success as he was already far from Konoha and had avoided any detection so far. He made his way to Taki and find any boat willing to take him across the ocean. After all, what better way to stay under the radar than not to be on the radar at all? He doubted any ninja would look as far as across the ocean, so it was necessary to travel overseas. He had little money, but he was sure he could use his skill set and shadow clones to help out, especially against any pirates they came across. His only regret of Konoha was not telling Am and Tucci where he was going. He wanted to tell them, but even with all the trust he had for them, he was sure the Konoha shinobi would pry it out of them, torture or not. After all, it only took one Yamanaka to do the job. It took 3 days of traveling at ninja speeds to make his way to the port city, and so far, had been able to avoid detection from Konoha or Taki ninjas. He had slept little and was constantly on guard against any ninjas, so he was heavily fatigued even with his regeneration. Still, he pressed on to his new dream. He was nearly there and was about to start his new life. As Naruto entered the port city, he was able to buy supplies from local stores that sold to him at a fair price. Now he was fully stocked with food, ninja apparel and civilian clothing, allowing him to better blend in. He threw away his old orange jumpsuit and equipped a new one and stored any additional clothing he bought into his storage scroll. Currently, Naruto was looking around for any boat that was willing to take him across the seas to a new land. It took several hours till he found a ship willing to hire him aboard for a fee, which he happily accepted. Now he was ready to set off into a new land. And a new adventure. Chapter 2. Direction. It had been 3 days since Naruto left Konoha, and many changes were occurring internally and externally with the return of the Yondaime and his family. However, not everything was good, and for the family things were darker than ever. Flashback. It was already 1 day since Naruto left Konoha, and no one had noticed his disappearance. The village on the other hand was abuzz with activity, with word having gotten out about the 4th Hokage's return, and the village celebrated in honor of their hero. Some had even celebrated further, looking for the demon brat to end its existence once and for all, or to capture him and give Yondaime the opportunity to do so himself. As expected, the villagers were unsuccessful in finding him, but they didn't mind, their hero was back and would protect them from any future threats. Little did they understand the full extent of what they thought and had done to poor Naruto. Minato and the family can be seen preparing for the official reclamation of the Hokage position in the Namikaze estate. The family was busy, especially Naruko, who was getting used to the new faces of Konoha. Narumi and Naruko were worried for their brother, having not seen him since the storm yesterday, and they had hoped to spend time with him and to get to know him, but so far he hadn't shown up to greet them. It worried them and brought them down a little since they wanted to be a family. Still, they didn't give up hope. They would see him after the ceremony, and they would finally be the family they were meant to be. There, however, was one thing of concern that caught Naruko's attention. There were often whispers of a demon brat in the background, with the villagers discreetly communicating about its coming end. Naruko didn't know what they meant, but she felt angry at those words. First day with Kushina and Minato. It was now midday, the sun was shining brightly in the sky, with the occasional cloud passing by. The ground was slightly wet and muddy, but was quickly drying by the change of weather. It was much different from yesterday when thunderstorms rained in the sky, forcing the family to seek shelter at their estate without Naruto. They thought it was best that he thought things through before they confronted him again. After all, it was a lot to take in so suddenly. Sarutobi didn't say much about how he lived and what he had been through, but it was enough to shape the picture that things weren't well with Naruto. It would only be later today that they fully understood the horrid details of Naruto's life. The welcoming ceremony took place at the Hokage Tower, with the Namikaze family standing side by side, except for Narumi, who was being held by Kushina. Minato and Kushina looked over the vast crowd, seeing their happy and cheerful faces, and looked on angry and disappointed. Both had spent some time with Sarutobi before the ceremony, in which he took opportunity of to delve deeper in detail of Naruto's life. From there they knew things hadn't gone the way they had hoped, with Jiraiya and Tsunade having left Naruto to the whims of the village. Whims that was clearly detrimental to his growth and psyche. When Kushina and Minato heard what was going on with Naruto, they didn't believe Sarutobi at first. That was until they read his ninja report, medical files and history that were handed to them to read. They didn't have much time to read the large folders before the ceremony, but the first few pages told them everything they needed to know. They told a story of an abused and neglected child left to the wolves of the village, and it made them sick, and to top it off, they had begun noticing the whispers of the villagers, saying to find the demon brat for them to finish it off. To ensure that didn't happen, Minato had ordered the Anbu to watch the villagers and ensure nothing happened to Naruto, or there would be severe ramifications. Kushina was feeling the worst of the two, since she had lived her life as the previous Jinchuriki to the nine-tailed fox and understood how difficult such a burden was, yet she had left her very own son to go through that pain 1,000 times worse. She couldn't call herself his mother with all she had put him through, and wished she had thought differently at the time of their separation. Truly, they had made a mistake in entrusting Naruto's care to these people. They only hoped they could explain to Naruto the circumstances around their decision, and in time he would forgive them of their slights, regardless of how unlikely that would be. It was time for the ceremony, and Minato had expressed his disappointment and fury at the villagers for what they did to his own flesh and blood. A lot of the villagers were confused on that matter, but he quickly cleared that up with a shocking revelation of Naruto being his son. Immediately most of the villagers and shinobi knew they were in trouble. Shortly after the ceremony, Minato and Kushina continued to look over the large records of Naruto's life. They wanted to find him and apologize, but they couldn't go in blind again. Who knows what kind of damage they would cause if they joked about new revelations to him again or brought up something that happened. They spent hours looking over the records, delving deeper into his life, and so far it painted a terrible picture: the abuse, neglect, torture, suffering, pain, mistrust and worst of all, loss. They found out in greater detail that Naruto had lived a terrible life, being kicked out of the orphanage at 6, constant homeless periods, short-term accommodation that changed randomly, trashed apartments, overpriced necessities, beatings, abuse, poor academic records, long medical files and much, much more in his 9-year life in Konoha. To top it off, he only found out recently of him being a Jinchuriki from a traitor no less, who mocked him while killing someone precious to him. Frankly, they were surprised he was still sane by all he's been through, but even then they grew concerned. After all, they were unsure how he would react to yesterday's revelation. They needed to talk to Naruto as soon as possible and help him through the pain. The thought of their child going through that alone scared them. With all bad records out of the way, they couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Through his suffering, Naruto had made do with what he had, showing resourcefulness as well as maintaining a cheery attitude to life, whether it was a mask or not. That, coupled with him maintaining sanity through all the pain, showed strong mental fortitude. Naruto had also continually demonstrated determination and perseverance by working towards his dream of becoming Hokage, regardless of the bias and hindrances pushing against him. He wasn't strong and was considered the weakest in the class, but with his attitude, along with him being their son, they were sure with the right push he would become strong and a future beacon for the next generation of the Will of Fire. Little did they know it was already too little too late. But Am and Tucci, both of Naruto's precious people, were unable to attend the welcoming ceremony for the return of the Hokage, but that didn't mean they didn't know what was happening. The gossip channel was running rampart, and working in a raiment stand allowed them to find out the situation. It came out as a surprise that the parents that had abandoned Naruto's to his deplorable fate were Minato and Kushina Namikaze. Then again, his similarity to Minato was noticeable with his blonde hair and blue eyes, and looking back they had to stop themselves from face-palming from the obvious. Next, they found out that Naruto had a twin sister and a younger 3-year-old sister. They couldn't help but think how horrible the meeting must have been with the supposed family, having lived happily together in a life of luxury, while he got the shorter end of the stick, suffering throughout his life. It made them angry that their carelessness had caused him so much pain. Even now they continue to support his decision to leave. Who knows what would have happened if he stayed. There was simply too much pressure working against him, and it wouldn't have been long till he snapped. It was obvious that eventually they would notice Naruto was missing and would go seeking answers. They were close to Naruto, and almost everyone knew it, so they were the likely suspects of his whereabouts. Fortunately for them, they didn't know where he was specifically and could bypass basic shinobi interrogation tactics, since they just simply didn't know where he went. Still, they would do what they could to buy him time to escape from the clutches of Konoha, so if the family ever came around to the store for questions, they would just counter by saying they don't know. After all, they didn't have the right, having caused so much suffering. Besides, Naruto was better off without them, since he didn't owe them anything while they owed him everything. AM stopped her line of thought and looked up to the clear blue sky. Naruto, I hope you're happy wherever you are. A2. As much as Minato and Kushina wanted to spend time with Naruto to reconnect, they were simply too busy yesterday with council meetings and rebuilding their position in Konoha. That, coupled with the ceremony and looking through Naruto's records, had taken far too much time out of the day, and they simply didn't want to disturb him when it was already late, so they decided to put off the family reunion till the next day. The day the family had decided they would try what they could to reconnect with Naruto, despite the likelihood of failure, since they owed him so much and they had no idea where to start building the bridge. Naruko herself had only recently learned what had transpired in her twin's life and was disgusted with the village, her parents and most of all herself. Had she been more persistent in her approach to return to Konoha, much of her brother's suffering could have been avoided. Minato and Kushina at first tried to pin the blame on the missing godparents being Jiraiya and Tsunade, however Naruko's reply was it was as much their fault for trusting people that weren't family to Naruto's care, and they should have kept track on what was happening to their son, instead of blindly trusting others with their own child. The family knew they deserved nothing but hatred from the boy, but they would do whatever it took to get Naruto in their lives. Naruko and the family went to extra lengths to prepare for the apology, bringing with them a great number of jutsu scrolls, books, necessities and even large amounts of ryo to at least satiate the pain they had exposed him to. It wasn't much in comparison to the large records of suffering he had endured, but it was a start. The family, along with little Narumi, left the Namikaze estate with their apology present sealed into a storage scroll and began making their way to Naruto's last known apartment. On the way, they were greeted by many past friends and civilians who either wanted to say hello or ask for forgiveness for what they have done or what they didn't do. The family was too focused to care and only replied with glares and disgusted looks. After all, it wasn't them they should be apologizing to. Most of the shinobi, civilians and old friends flinched at their reply, understanding clearly how much they messed up. Most hoped that over time they would attain some level of forgiveness. The family arrived outside the known apartment after walking to the third story and noticed belongings and furniture of various kinds scattered outside the apartment's entrance. Early spring cleaning was what the family thought, simultaneously thinking that Naruto was replacing run-down furniture. After all, who would be stupid enough to evict him when word had spread that he was the Yondame's son? Surely no one was that stupid, right? Minato knocked on the door and the family waited for a response. No response. There were no signs of Naruto registering the knock on the other side. Still they waited. Naruko decided to check if the front door was open, only to find it locked. Did Naruto leave early? The family collectively thought, unsure how to proceed. Still they decided to wait a while, hoping he would return soon and meet up with them. 30 minutes later. Nothing had happened for 30 minutes and the family was patiently waiting for Naruto's return, then suddenly out of nowhere. What are you people doing? If you want to beat the demon brat, I'm sorry to say I evicted him 2 days ago. Couldn't pay the special demon rent, you know. The now identified fat landlord spoke with pride in his voice, likely from causing the demon the suffering he deserved. All three members clenched their fists except Narumi, who was confused at what was going on. It was clear to them that the landlord was outside the gossip loop, wasn't present at the return of the Yondame ceremony, nor recognized the Yondame himself standing in front of him. Wait, 2 days ago? Was the simultaneously response by Naruko, Minato and Kushina. 2 days ago was when they had just arrived and talked to Naruto. If he wasn't living here, then where had he been living? That scared them. After all, if he was evicted, then all the stuff outside were his belongings and not garbage. That meant he hadn't been able to move them to a new home, as transporting equipment for ninja was easy. It was also noticeable that some necessities were missing, such as blankets, pillows and food. Did that mean Naruto was living outside? Was he homeless again? Was he sleeping in the rain? The landlord continued in a cheery and upbeat voice, still unable to comprehend the situation. Yeah, that demon got what he deserved. Sucks for him, doubt anyone would take that spawn in after I evicted him that stormy night. Probably was sleeping in the trash can where he belongs, Hida. The landlord was unable to finish as Kushina appeared in a flash in front of him with raging eyes and fist cocked back, then in a split second Chakra punched him as hard as she could. Before the rest of the family could react to his words, the landlord was already sent flying, breaking down the wooden railing on the opposite end and crashing to the street below. Kushina, however, wasn't done yet and San shinned to him and proceeded to bash the living crap out of the fool till he was a bleeding and bruised mess. To emphasize her hate of the man, she took out a kunai with the intent to end him, only to have her arm stopped by Minato. Here, I know how you feel, but we can't kill him. As Hokage, I have to keep these villagers alive. He all but spat the word villagers. He didn't want to protect them as much as he did in the past with what they had done to his own son, instead he had to do it as part of his duty. Kushina glared at Minato, but understood where he was coming from, so she put the kunai down and left the man in a pool of his own blood. Minato however just called the Anbu to send him to the hospital, and when he had recovered enough to be sent straight to Ibiki for torture and interrogation. Now the family had another problem to deal with. Where was Naruto? Not wasting any time, the family worked on finding any leads his location. Narumi had to be returned to the Namikaze estate with a hired babysitter and Anbu as guards watching over while the rest of the family worked on locating Naruto and finding any leads as to where he was. Even the shinobi and Anbu were sent around Konoha and its training grounds to investigate. Kushina and Naruto had bypassed the searching by first making their way to Ichiraku's ramen, knowing that Naruto's precious people worked there. They were however disappointed when they replied they hadn't seen him all day or knew where he was. Kushina and Naruto noticed they were hiding something but didn't delve deeper into it and continued to look elsewhere for Naruto. It was now night and there was no sign of Naruto. It was concluded that he had left the village and Anbu agents were sent out to retrieve him, however that was a fool's task with the storm having covered his tracks and him having over a day's head start. The conclusion had come about when Kushina and Naruto ended up returning to the ramen stand with Minato stating they were hiding something about Naruto. From there it didn't take long to pry out the information from AM and Tucci due to the threat of working against the village and the consequences. Sure, the two workers didn't know where Naruto had went, but they at least knew he had left during the storm to take full advantage of the track covering potential as well as the confusion around Minato's return. Immediately Minato had tasked the Anbu to spread out and search Fire Country and any allied countries for his estranged son. As Hokage, Minato could have had the pair sent to prison for working against Konoha and not notifying them earlier or even stopping Naruto, but no matter what way he saw it, they weren't at fault and were looking out for him. Besides, if he did send them to prison it would only make the relation worse with Naruto and he would never forgive them then. Still, he hoped he would be found, captured and returned, in which they can finally work to make things right. Day 3. It was the third day of the return of the Namikaze and the shinobi and Anbu outside Konoha were on high alert for any signs of Naruto. Kushina wanted to join them, but Minato convinced her to stay since she needed to take care of Narumi and the ninja outside were working overtime to look for him, especially Sarutobi who also joined in the search. With him searching for Naruto it would only be a matter of time till he is found, after all he was the previous Hokage. Her interference would just change very little in the search for Naruto. The day was also the day that Naruto would enter the Ninja Academy for the first time. Academy had been postponed due to recent events, however was set start up once again and she was excited to enter, but also sad at going to a major place of Naruto's suffering. She really wanted to see Naruto again, apologize to him and build what relationship she could with her brother. However that was becoming less and less likely each passing day he had left Konoha. Naruto was sorry and depressed over the loss of her brother, but that wouldn't keep her down as she was more determined than ever to bring her Nai-san back and make things right. It was her goal, no dream, to complete the family as it should be. To do that she needed to get stronger, she needed to train and study. No more mistakes, everything would be complete once Nai-san was returned. Naruto prepared herself for the academy. She was already strong, having trained with her parents extensively and would capitalize on what she already knew. She needed to pass academy as soon as possible and begin her search for her brother and bring him back, whether he wanted to or not. Naruto arrived at the academy and proceeded to the classroom 302, her brother's classroom. She entered the room and looked around, analyzing the different children that were likely to be her teammates. So far there were only 8 others in the room that she saw potential in. She didn't know their names, but in time that was likely to change, maybe she would even have a rival to top of her friendships. Naruto looked around for a free seat and noticed a female with black hair, onyx eyes, a slim figure and wearing a purple ninja kimono staring out the window, while on her right were 2 free seats. Seeing no harm in taking one, Naruto made her way to the free middle seat, moving up the stairs and eventually sitting down. The girl hadn't noticed her yet, so she decided to initiate the conversation. "Hi, I'm Naruto Namikaze, mind if I sit here?" she questioned, curious of the girl. The female replied, "Actually yeah I do, could you scurry across one? Naruto usually sits there and he should be coming in soon, although I doubt he'd want to sit next to you." Naruto gulped. Guess this girl was a friend of Naruto's, or at least an acquaintance with him, and knew about his complicated situation. Yet she wasn't aware that Naruto was actually missing. Guess it was her duty to inform her. About that, well you see Naruto kinda left the village," she responded, unsure on how to best convey the situation. This immediately got the attention of the girl as she spun around and looked at her seriously. "What?" "Yeah, my brother kind of left, but don't you worry, as soon as I graduate, I'll drag him back and make things right." Naruto replied, upbeat and confident in her abilities and dream. The female scoffed, "Yeah right, you were likely the people that drove him away in the first place." Seriously, just rocking up randomly right after someone close to Naruto was killed and saying you're his family that abandoned him. It's no wonder why he left. Naruto flinched at the jab and then got angry. Who the hell are you to say such things, Captain Obvious? Figures a weak and a mentally challenged girl like you wouldn't know much about me. I'm the last Uchiha, Satsuki Uchiha, and the prodigy of the clan. She replied smugly to Naruto, which only seemed to infuriate her further. Yeah, the clan of 2 people while the rest was wiped out by your older brother. What's Naruto to you anyway? I don't think you're Naruto's friend or he would have told you he was leaving like he did with Am and Tucci. She replied with a smug smirk of her own. The newly identified Satsuki blushed red in anger and embarrassment and stood up in defiance. Naruto stood up to match her and they both stared down one another. It was the start of a beautiful friendship. Satsuki at the end of the day. Satsuki didn't pay much attention in class and thought over the recent developments in Konoha and her interaction with Naruto. She had no real friends and was often lonely with Naruto being her only light, challenging her every day to enforce the point he was her rival and would one day beat her. Satsuki thought it was funny at first and daily beat him to the ground to prove her superiority, yet he stood back up with fire and determination in his eyes and continued to challenge her. When she asked why, his simple reply was she was strong and he wanted to be strong as well, and if he managed to beat her, it would mean that he got stronger and a step closer to his dream of being Hokage. She was confused at first, but thought over what he said over time and eventually understood when she saw him training alone. He was an orphan back then and survived alone. He was just determined to prove himself, to show he was somebody, and she admired that attitude of his. Sure, he was weak, but with recent revelations it was completely understandable, being hated by everyone with all the bias aimed towards him. It was a surprise to her that he remained sane through all that suffering. She had hoped to see him in the academy today, to talk to him and to actually become friends and not just rivals, however all for naught as she found out he left to start a new life elsewhere. Satsuki couldn't blame him. She had noticed his treatment with the occasional whisper of demon brat directed to him. She only found out what it had meant and truthfully it just made her respect for him grow. He persevered through the hardship and pain, all with a desire to get stronger in order to attain respect from fellow peers and villagers, even when they didn't deserve it. That's what always made him unique and different from the rest and in her eyes, someone capable. It was only recent when things had begun to change. On top of the abuse, Iruka, their previous teacher, had been killed and from what she heard by Mizuki, another teacher who turned traitor. Naruto and Iruka were not entirely close at the time, but he did watch over Naruto and as such, it came to no surprise that Naruto was depressed over his death. If that was all, things would have rolled over in time, but it wasn't the end of the week. Instead, another problem shows up. The Namikaze family. For Naruto to suddenly find out that his family was alive all along living happily together seemed to have pushed him over the edge and he left. Satsuki sighed. She wished he could have at least talked to him about it, but she guessed all the times she had purposely mocked him for his weakness had negative effect on his view of her. She didn't do it out of hate, rather she did it because she cared, and her words continued to drive him to become stronger. Still, he was gone and there was nothing she could do about it while she stayed in Konoha. She wished she could at least have talked to him one more time to become an official friend to him, but it was too late. No, it wasn't too late. She would find him and tell him what she thought of him. She will make things right. But Naruto. Day 4. Naruto had set out with the sailors in the trading boat to a continent overseas and towards a place called the Empire. Naruto didn't know much about the place and only picked up tidbits of information from what the sailors told him. It was west of the elemental nations and just like the elemental nations was a large continent with the dominant power being the Empire. It was a long sail to reach their destination and they didn't know much about the area, not having delved too deep within, but they were able to collect information from rumors of traders at port. Apparently the elemental nations have only just discovered their existence about a year ago and have started small-scale trade with the locals. From what the sailors had gathered on the other side, the empire was said to have been around for 1,000 years and boasted numerous resources and land. At the founding, the empire was said to have limitless resources and the best minds of the world, with the emperor having absolute authority, but was now going through decline due to corruption, economic recession, eroding public order, rampart poverty and dissatisfaction with the people. Still, with how big the empire was said to be and a new identity he had, he was sure he would be able to make a fresh start there. One particular piece of information that he found interesting was the rumors of danger beasts or risk species that roamed the continent that were extremely hostile to humans, attacking them if they wander into their territory. Naruto had wondered if these danger beasts were like summoned creatures and if he could make a contract with one. After all, his combat repertoire was severely lacking, not having completed the academy. He supposed his first order of business would be training and attaining strength, and with groups hunting down danger beast he supposed he could join in and make some money, get to know strong people, while also completing some training. Things were finally looking up for Naruto until suddenly. Boom. A whizzing sound was heard from the distance and Naruto spun around to the direction of the noise to see a ship in the distance. What was going on? He thought himself until the situation was clarified by one word and one scream. Pirates. Chapter 3 Landfall. After a week of sailing, Naruto had finally arrived at a port town south of the empire. Once he disembarked and said his goodbyes to the sailors as well as his new friends, Naruto walked down the harbor side taking note of the city surroundings. Immediately he noticed the similarities and difference in the architect of the city, as buildings bore similarities to elemental nation design, particularly that of Konoha, but had a more rugged and modern feel to them, with the prioritization of cement and bricks rather than wood. Naruto thought it was unique and extravagant in its own way and grew more excited to see what the capital was like once he began traveling around and got to know the empire first. He had heard many great things about the empire from its navy, particularly from Wave and his master, and was excited to see as much of it as he could, from the ports, to the cities, to the wild wilderness and to the mountains. It was so different to that of Konoha, and this time he could freely explore without interruptions of ninja hunting him. Naruto was free. He felt free. No more abusive villagers to deal with and no more lies piling on behind his back. He could do what he wanted, be what he wanted and find actual friends that would care about him. Just thinking about what lay ahead made him giddy with excitement. As Naruto traveled down the streets he thought back to Wave, his master and the navy, and couldn't help but wonder what lay in store for him. Flashback. Pirates. One of the deck men shouted. Pirates were a constant danger in the seas and it appears Naruto wasn't lucky enough to avoid them. It was clear what was going to happen, so without a second thought Naruto rushed in to help defend the ship by created 20 clones to clear the deck for the upcoming fight and to gather weapons for the sailors. Additional clones were also tasked to man the cannons and help load them with heavy metal balls for the initial phase of naval combat. It was a struggle at first as gunpowder and projectile weaponry wasn't common in the elemental nation, nor were they widespread due to them having little effect against ninjas and their mobility in combat, resulting in Naruto's lack of practical knowledge. However, guns and cannons eventually found greater use elsewhere, particularly in boats, due to the lack of shinobi personnel to fight and defend against, other than in Kiri, as well as the lack of mobility people held when sailing. As such, gunpowder and cannons found more use with civilians and the naval trade being a common sight at the ports. At first the crew were momentarily shocked at Naruto's ability, however quickly assumed he was a shinobi, or at the very least a shinobi in training, and their spirits were lifted as a result. They began working double time to ensure they weren't shown up by a kid, shinobi or not. Naruto looked up and noticed more ships coming in and counted 3 in total. They weren't all firing, rather only one ship seemed to be as it tried to clear the deck of its defenders. It was clear what they were planning as the pirates continued their approach. They want the ship in one piece, Naruto thought naturally. They were pirates after all, and regardless if they were after the ship itself, he knew they would be interested in whatever contents they were currently carrying. It didn't matter to Naruto either way and simply continued loading the cannons along with his clones and fired back whenever they could. So far little damage was being done to the pirates and there were simply too many of them, so he quickly assumed the fight could only be won through hand-to-hand combat. As such, he prepared himself. Naruto already had the advantage and he knew it. A couple hundred clones can be summoned to kill and cause havoc, and what's more, the sooner a ship came close the more room he had to summon clones. It was the perfect ambush and he doubted any of the pirates would be prepared for a fight where they would be outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The ships were close now. Some of the pirates threw grappling hooks onto the trade boat, but that did nothing to deter Naruto, rather it excited him. He was going to board a pirate ship, spam clones, and beat the crap out of them. He had a lot of pent-up frustration that needed an outlet. So far the battle had been going well in Naruto's favor, however things quickly changed when the capital pirate ship made its move towards them. Clearly the lead captain was on that ship after all, it was the biggest and most heavily fortified ship out of the pirates. Deciding to use the size of the ship to his advantage, the original Naruto procured a grappling hook from the pirate ship and swung it up to the capital ship and secured it. Then he ran up with vigor while preparing his hand signs for more shadow clones. Immediately clones began popping up all around the ship and began engaging whatever pirates they could find, and so far the combat was easy, they were all civilian level, hence being easy prey for a warrior of his caliber, regardless of how weak he currently was in comparison to other shinobi. Naruto suddenly dodged to the side as a spear was sent flying right past his face. The origin of the spear was from a large bulky man rippling with muscles and had a large mustache on his face. The dodge kitty cockily smirked as Naruto's instincts ran wild again, forcing him to dodge. Surprisingly, when he looked back he noticed the spear coming for him yet again, this time there wasn't a person throwing it. It was as if it had a mind of its own and acted like a boomerang. Not bad. The man smirked again, clearly amused at his opponent. That's one amazing Tigu you've got. The ability to create physical copies of yourself. Not a bad catch. Tigu? What's that? Naruto thought, confused. Sure, he had chakra, but he never heard it being referred to as Tigu before. Is it their version of chakra? Regardless, Naruto had to beat this guy. As much as he preferred not to engage in a fight, he needed to end the pirates and ensure the crew survived, or else he'd be stuck in the middle of the ocean with no direction to go, and that's if he survived after losing. Deciding not to give any information away, Naruto created more clones and had them attack the bulky person with a weird mustache. As expected, his attacks proved fruitless with his lack of taijutsu style against a more skilled and experienced opponent. The only thing he had advantageous over the man was numbers and stamina. The man expertly used his spear to destroy the clones, spinning around as if he were some ballerina. Your fighting style sucks, kid. How about you leave those merchants and join my crew? I'm sure you'll be an excellent addition after some training. We have money, slaves, women. I'm sure you'll know what decision to take since you'll die otherwise. The bulky mustache man said cockily yet again. Naruto was appalled at what he had heard towards the end. These people actually took slaves and actively tortured them, having found out by the clones sent into the interior of the ship. It appears there was another useful aspect of the clones he had just found out. The accumulation of knowledge the clones see when dispelled. Naruto abhorred slavery and torture as it was tantamount to aspects of his old life, as such he was even firmer in opposing the newly identified captain. Attacking again over and over using his clones and superior stamina, it took 30 minutes before he was able to overwhelm the captain and eventually kill him with a kunai to the heart. This, however, was a shallow victory in Naruto's eyes, and it was a clear indicator that he had to improve his combat skills to deal with the tougher opponents. It would be one of the primary focuses he would have to deal with as soon as he secured accommodation, a steady supply of money and food. Another 30 minutes later, the sailors of the merchant ship began securing the deck and releasing the prisoners, while also tying up or executing the pirate slave traders. Eventually another ship entered the arena, but this time it wasn't another pirate ship. It's simply far too elaborately designed. Naruto heard one of the crewmen shout, "It's the Empire's navy." Clearly the ship itself was a patrol ship securing the waters for the Empire, but its presence alone brought relief to Naruto and the crew. It was sort of a letdown though that the navy shows up just after the battle, then again it was better than them not showing up at all. It was several hours later, after having dealt with the pirates and the slaves, that custody was transferred over to the navy. Naruto in that time had managed to make a new friend while familiarizing himself with the Empire. He met a young kid named Wave who was just above his age, training aboard the vessel alongside his master teacher. I'm going to just refer him to Wave's master as I know nothing on him. His dream was to join the navy and fight for the Empire, but it was clear that it was a loose dream and acted more of a set goal than a lifetime achievement. Still, Naruto found the kid fun to talk to, and officially Wave was his first friend. From his talks with Wave, Naruto was able to learn more about the Empire, the people that inhabit it, the geography, the countries that surrounds it, and the dangers it faces. He learned that there were powerful fighters, mainly referred to as generals, that protected the Empire, and the many different kinds of people he was likely to meet. Sometimes Wave gave him warnings of bad people to watch out for, but Naruto, being Naruto with his vast experiences with bad people, knew he could handle whatever they threw his way. One significant piece of information Naruto learned from Wave was that the people didn't have access to chakra. Rather, they relied on normal combat prowess, special biological gifts and technology to fight. One example was the development and standard issue of guns to soldiers, these days being a common sight in the Empire's military. Wave mentioned that guns have been developed and specialized over time, having come a long way in manufacturing with great velocity, reload time and power behind each flying bullet. To them it was an extremely effective way to combat enemies of the Empire, however the downside was it was less effective against the more powerful and experienced foes. As such, it is mainly used to deal with the more common and weaker form of enemies encountered. An additional product of their technology was the development of Tigu. Although no longer in production, he learned that these items were specialized weapons with certain effects, allowing the user to do abnormal feats of nature, similar to bloodlines of chakra users. He learned that they were made from danger beasts of various kinds, similar to summons, which also had distinct abilities, as their biological parts were eventually used to make the Tigu, copying the beast's effects. The weapon over time then chose its master, having a form of sentience over its user, usually having a requirement that they must fulfill. The only downside was it was rare to find Tigu, only having 48 in existence, most already being in use and others lost in time. Still, it was an interesting prospect, and Naruto now wanted to attain a Tigu to become stronger. He finally understood what the pirate captain was drawling on about during their fight and why he was stronger than the normal pirate. After the navy secured the slaves, the pirates and their ships, they proceeded to leave, but not before giving a recommendation to Naruto to join the empire. Of course Naruto refused, saying he wanted to explore first, so bidding them goodbye, Naruto and the crew of the ship continued to sail towards a port city of the empire, one of them more eager to start his new life. Flashback end. Back to the present. Naruto pushed on into the city, giddy in each step he took. He looked around, inspecting the city surroundings while making his way inward. The further he traveled, the more he noticed diversity of the people. Everywhere he looked, strangers walked by in all shapes and sizes. Some wore basic ragged clothing, while others had royal and business-oriented clothing he had never seen before. The fashion in the empire was entirely new to him, and while there was great diversity in Konoha, it held no match to the diversity he saw here. Naruto's stomach grumbled in hunger, and he realized that he had yet to eat. Deciding he had nothing to lose, he made his way to the smell of cooking meat. Naruto eventually found himself in front of a store vendor who was cooking meat over a grill. Naruto's mouth watered in anticipation, but realized he had no money to pay for food. He needed to find cash and work, and stealing would prove disastrous long-term, especially when he was somewhere new and didn't want to attract attention to himself just yet. Besides, this was his fresh start, and it would be pointless sullying it with stealing. He did it to survive, it didn't define who he was as an individual. Also, he didn't want to have to deal with his so-called family looking for him while he was weak, eventually creating more problems for him, leading to his capture, and that's if those bastards end up looking for him. As such, for the time being he had to avoid attention. Naruto didn't know where to start looking for jobs, and being curious about the new scenery, ended up playing off his feelings of hunger and instead focused on exploring the different shops, libraries and cafes he could find. As he walked down the street, he noticed people sent him strange looks, some lustful and others confused. It was definitely a step up from the hateful and disgusted looks Konoha citizens sent his way. It was evident Naruto was a foreigner, with his looks being extremely exotic, with little to no people having sun-kissed blonde hair, deep sky blue eyes and whisker marks on their cheeks. As such, regardless of his efforts to remain conspicuous, Naruto still received a large amount of attention. This exotic look, however, worked not only to get the occasional attention from glances, but also attain attention from the more shady type of people. What Naruto didn't know was the city and all of the empire had a much darker side. Sure, he heard the sailors and waves say a few things about murders and kidnappings happening all around, he just didn't know how serious it was, its extent and how deeply rooted it was in society. As Naruto passed an alleyway, a group of thugs jumped him, hoping to drag him in and take advantage of what they could get by either selling him to some rich noble or having an extra pair of hands to do slave labor. Unfortunately for them, they didn't know who he was or what they were messing with and had to deal with the awesomeness that was Naruto Uzumaki. The thugs were weak and easy for Naruto. A couple of clones and some below-the-belt punches and they were out for the count. Sure, his taijutsu could use some improvement, but he was a ninja, or at the very least a civilian that had undergone some ninja training and survived harsh life conditions. Once Naruto had knocked the thugs out, he ignored them in favor of returning to his search for work and accommodation. For the moment it looks like he would have to sleep on the streets, as he simply couldn't just break into an apartment to sleep, and he didn't have any money with him, only Ryo that was not exchangeable yet. There may be accommodation for lost children like him, but he was not willing to chance it after the last time he took that path, only to end up beaten for every inch of his life. Besides, he had experience living on the streets, and it wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. Eventually Naruto came across an information board. Although he couldn't read the language completely, the use of shadow clones and learning aboard the ship helped immensely. He could tell the board had some jobs on it and could make out some of the requirements, being a servant or maid or working in cafe as a chef or waiter, but he knew those weren't the job for him. He wasn't even sure he could perform such work and would end up being a waste of time. He wanted a job where he could have action with more physical requirements to improve his strength like a shinobi. Looking further, he noticed there was one job on the board that was interesting, and it had to do with danger beast hunting. It was interesting as he would not only gain money from finding and killing danger beasts, but he would also gain battle experience on top of his plant training. It was the best way to improve quickly other than joining through the military. He simply wasn't ready to commit himself to anything just yet. Interested, Naruto took the flyer and walked towards a specified hunting agency for more information. He had a future to start. Chapter 4. Friends and Enemies. Time skip. 3 years summary. Naruto's training, traveling and hunting in the vastness of the empire went on for the betterment of 2 years, allowing him to accumulate knowledge, improve his combat capability, and increase his ninjutsu reservoir. The scrolls AM and Tucci left him were a great help with its various combat styles, as he utilized and adapted whatever he could find, such as various chakra exercises and ninjutsu, to propel his strength further. In this time Naruto had enjoyed exploring the vastness of the empire. Sure, it was huge and he had barely covered anything, but that did nothing to deter his excitement every time he looked at the landscape. So far he had only covered a small portion of the south area of the empire, being sure to keep to the maps. As he explored he came across different towns and cities along the shores or in the countryside that were populated by various kinds of people. Most people kept to their own business, but as he walked he noticed the common sight of beggars and snobbish people harassing them. Sometimes he would interfere, other times he didn't, and each time he did he would get in some type of trouble and end up having to run away. He remembered the first time he did so only to find out he messed with a government official. He wasn't willing to risk becoming a target of any sort again. As he explored further into the empire it was becoming more obvious that there was something amiss. He could openly see corruption on the street whether through money, drugs or trafficking, and it truly disgusted him. Something was clearly wrong. Naruto had also come to understand that there was a rise in violent behavior and an increase in rebellious activity, and what was worse was that he bore witness to the effects rebellion had on the empire and the brutality that followed as a result. Flashback. Naruto walked down a common road on his way to another city, but so far he had yet to see anyone passing by on the road. Considering there was a large town up ahead it was confusing. As he walked closer to the next town the smell of ash, blood and rotting corpses began to permeate through the air, getting stronger with each step he took. This concerned him and he looked up into the sky, noticing the black smoke rising in the distance. Concluding something was wrong, Naruto rushed onwards to the town. As Naruto passed a large hill he was greeted to the sight of the town burning with most of the riverbed frozen. He looked further and noticed military personnel slaughtering, torturing and raping the civilians. As he looked on he could feel the agony of the people and without thinking rushed in to stop the atrocity. He didn't get far however as he encountered a female, the military commander he assumed from the official getup of her uniform. She was young, somewhere in her teenage years with long blue hair stretching below her hips, with an official military commander hat on her head. Her military uniform consisted of a white one-piece female military dress with a skirt ending halfway up her knees and outlined with black leather along various parts. In addition to the uniform she had leather arm holders covering most of her arms and thick white leg holders also outlined with black leather, giving her a sadistic feel. This is Estes, but Naruto just doesn't know who she is yet. Analyzing deeper he could see she was equipped with a very long rapier and noticed most of her cleavage showing with a weird tattoo in the middle. Overall in Naruto's eyes she was a beautiful sight that managed to deter him from his initial charge. He could tell she was strong just by looking at her with power, confidence and authority rolling off her in spades. It had Naruto stop and think for a second. Still behind her he could see the agony people were being subjected to. It was far worse than anything he'd seen or faced and it disgusted him. Focusing back on what was happening he rushed off trying to bypass the woman, however couldn't do so as she blocked his path with phenomenal speed while outstretching her rapier in a challenging motion at Naruto. She had a smirk on her face as no words were exchanged between the two. Naruto, knowing what the military was doing, continued to try again to bypass the woman, only to fail over and over again. Looking at her he could tell she was just playing with him with a smirk evident on her face. Annoyed and unfocused, Naruto ignored his base instincts to run and live another day and instead engaged the female in combat, creating clones and using various techniques, including crude explosive tags and paper bombs. This did surprise the female momentarily, but like every professional soldier she easily adapted to whatever surprises Naruto threw at her by dodging or using her sword to deflect each attack he sent. She even managed to counter him when he was using Kurama's chakra, turning him feral and powerful. As the battle continued and escalated with him and the female beginning to destroy the road and trees surrounding, it became more apparent to Naruto that the female was just playing with him, as if he was some sort of game to her. It was clear he was outmatched as she had yet to show any moves of her own or even attack for that matter. Each time he attacked the female she was becoming more and more sadistic with a growing grin on her face. Suddenly without warning she went on the offensive, quickly appearing behind Naruto in a burst of speed and attacking with her rapier. Again it was clear she wasn't taking him seriously, yet he still struggled to dodge barely, avoiding her slashes. Eventually Naruto began to accumulate cuts and bruises from her attacks, and although they would easily heal over time, he was growing tired every passing second. As he looked around he began to notice more and more soldiers piling up surrounding him and the female. It was over. He knew he shouldn't have acted out, especially against the military, yet regardless he could do nothing. He was clearly beat and surrounded. Not willing to chance it, Naruto pulled out several smoke bombs to create a smokescreen and created as many clones as he could before leaping out and running in several directions. Most clones were shot down instantly, but for some reason he could tell they weren't killing shots, rather more aimed to suppress his escape. Unfortunately for them and lucky for him, he managed to get away, having to run several hours at top speed. It was clear the empire had powerful fighters and he needed more skill to combat them. He needed better ninjutsu and a sword. Flashback end. Fortunately for Naruto, no wanted posters had shown up and he continued his work as a danger beast hunter, reporting, discovering, killing and trading any danger beast he could find for money. He had a large portion of his time fighting and hunting for experience as he explored the lands, discovering many natural and man-made wonders on his way, as well as the many horrors of reality that followed. He underwent training when he could, using the scrolls to learn and improve his combat reservoir and survival skills. He started on Fuinjutsu, as it possessed many maneuvers in combat and outside, such as for storage, gravity-based seals and ambush seals. It appears that Uzumaki were naturals in creating and maintaining seals, as he found it easy to understand, as such it didn't take him long to learn, especially when his learning was amplified with shadow clones. After getting to a sufficient level in Fuinjutsu, he then began prioritizing his practice on ninjutsu and chakra control. He grew exponentially in these areas again with the aid of shadow clones. Truly they were the greatest cheat to humanity, it truly is lol. As he continued to train, Naruto began delving deeper into his mindscape, meeting the Kyuubi for the first time. At first the meeting was rough with both sides throwing insults at one another, but as time progressed and his constant pestering of the Kyuubi, he was able to reach out to him by giving him access to some of his senses, allowing him to observe what he observed. With his permission, of course. He guessed his persistence began wearing away at the Kyuubi's patience. Additionally, the prospect of exploring a new land away from the influence of the sage interested the Kyuubi, and he too wanted to see what was out there. Through this mutual understanding they eventually became friends to the point where he had given Naruto his actual name. Kurama. Naruto then began training further with the Kurama's chakra, but was making little progress with his age and conquering the bloodlust that followed. It was something he had to work on in the future. Additionally, Kurama had provided the basic details of the Rasengan, allowing Naruto to eventually recreate it, but for the moment needed the aid of clones to do so. He may have hated his biological father for abandoning him, but he did respect his power and genius, with the Rasengan being proof of that. Naruto isn't Naruto without Rasengan. As time passed, Naruto became more weary in his travels. Sure, there was much to see and explore, but he wanted more stable friendships and somewhere to settle down for a time. Although he was accustomed to sleeping outdoors as he hunted danger beasts, he had no one he could call a true friend that would watch his back and hang out with him. Sure, there were co-workers he worked with as he hunted danger beasts, but it was just that. Co-workers? No relationship stemmed from that, especially when he was dozens of years younger than them. Thinking over his progress and growth, he was satisfied where he was and supposed it was time he had a break and focused on living. Eventually, Naruto made his way to a small town south of the empire. It was poor with many people wearing ragged clothes, but they at least seemed content with what they had. A small knit community, something he liked. Sure, cities were big and fun, but he wanted somewhere where he could meet people and not just bypass them on the street. Deciding this was the place to settle down and to live life a bit more, Naruto searched for an inn and information on work. 1 year later. Naruto had spent a good year in the small town making several friends while spending time with his new stable job in the forge, molding metal into tools. Sure, it didn't pay much, but it was good practice. He even managed to forge his own sword. A katana. Something he had wanted for a time, and although he really wanted a Tengu version, they were extremely hard to find. Besides, the weapons wouldn't react to him as he had chakra, which for some reason the sentient weapons didn't like. He still on occasion went out to hunt danger beasts, but that was more of a rare occurrence when he needed pocket money to spend. For now he was more than happy to eat into his savings and enjoy his life in the small community. Naruto had also made friends his age. Sure, he was the more powerful and mature out of the bunch, but he didn't mind. To him they were his precious people he enjoyed spending time with. There was Tatsumi with brown hair and green eyes around his age, Ieyasu, don't know his color, and Seo, don't know her color. Initially they were a close-knit group, but he managed to worm his way in with the extra help of Seo. He just didn't understand why she blushed every time he went to talk to her. Eventually, as time passed, the friends grew closer and started seeing Naruto as the big brother and leader of the group, especially with him teaching and showing them all his cool moves. Sure, they couldn't use chakra, but that didn't mean they couldn't become powerful. After all, there were ninjas that couldn't use chakra and performed exceptionally in combat. Eventually the town got poorer and poorer, even with the amount of money Naruto was bringing into the community, all because of a famine and the increasing taxes levied by the government. Eventually Naruto and the group were asked by the mayor to help keep the town alive and agreed to help them any way they could and left to the capital to make money and gain influence. Present day. As Naruto entered the large gates of the capital wall, he was immediately greeted to the extravagant sight of large buildings covering the courtyard where many people went about their day in entering and leaving the city. The windows were made of glass, and the buildings themselves were several stories tall, made of cement and bricks. Sure, he had seen it in other cities, but not to the extent the capital made them. He looked further and noticed more towers in the distance that were built skyward, as if attempting to reach heaven itself. Further yet, he could see the inner walls and the palace that stretched even higher into the sky. Overall, the architect was impressive and outmatched any man-made city he had come across in the empire or in the elemental nations. No wonder the capital was seen as the seat of power. It was so vast and developed, showcasing the power of the empire. Naruto began traveling down the vast streets of the capital, paved with bricks and tiles. There were people everywhere, and the streets were packed to the point where people were almost brushing his shoulder as they walked past. Carriages driven by horses moved along the road, showcasing nobility and privilege in the empire. Even here he could see the difference between classes and the effect wealth had on social status. At least in the elemental nations, wealth didn't affect the identity of a person. As he walked down, he noticed stalls selling various merchandise and foods, as well as lampists set up to illuminate the streets at night. There were cafes all around with tables occupied by customers drinking coffee, reading book, or engaged in conversation. He just wished the group were together to see it all at once. Before arriving at the capital, Naruto had been separated from Tatsumi, Seo and Ieyasu after being attacked by danger beasts on the road. He knew they could handle themselves and would eventually meet them in the capital. Naruto himself had easily taken care of his portion of danger beasts that went after him, but the group was still separated. He had hoped they would have stayed close by and waited for him to finish instead of running off. Did they not trust his abilities? To top it off, Naruto couldn't use any sensing abilities to locate them. He could still sense chakra signatures to a degree, but in the empire such abilities were useless when the people didn't possess chakra. Still, he had expected to sense something from them, but even Kurama mentioned the lack of energy in individuals prevented him from sensing his desired targets. Regardless, he expanded his senses, and as he did so he could sense an extremely strong presence in the capital. It wasn't a chakra-based sense, but he could just feel the power rolling of the individual, just like the female he had encountered long ago. Naruto concluded it was best he avoid this individual. As Naruto continued to walk, he spotted a lady with D-cup breasts, held back by a thin leather strap that did nothing but emphasize the size of her chest and her curves. She was just exiting a bar with a happy smile and cheerful atmosphere about her, as if she had just scored something big. For a moment Naruto could swear he felt something from her, but played it off to instead stare at her as she walked down the street. As she passed him, he noticed she was carrying a large sack by her shoulder, and for some reason he felt that the sack was extremely familiar. Chalking it up to coincidence, he decided it was time for a break and entered the bar. As he entered the bar, he noted the square tables and chairs being occupied by customers. He looked at the wall, noting wanted posters of criminals posted up, and the bar at the far end, stacked with beer bottles and wines of various types, waiting to be served out. He looked around again, and to his surprise, he saw Tatsumi sitting alone at one of the tables, with a mixture of happiness and perverseness on his face. Likely from the conspicuous female that just exited the bar. Tatsumi. There you are. Where are Seo and Ieyasu? Also, what's with that goofy grin? Naruto inquired, relieved to find a familiar face out of the crowd of people. Tatsumi looked up, returning from whatever dreamland he was imagining, and was momentarily shocked to see Naruto in front of him. Quickly recovering, Tatsumi replied with his famous grin. I'm getting commissioned into the army. Huh? Naruto replied, momentarily confused. What did I say about joining the military, Tatsumi? It's bad business and dangerous. You also don't make much as a soldier. Yeah, I know. I got this beautiful one-san that has connections to the military to give me a head start. She's going to inform the captain now. And pray tell, how did you get a hot lady like her to help you out? Naruto said with a hint of mockery in his voice, yet Tatsumi didn't notice. Not bashing. Tatsumi is cool. I paid her. Silence. You paid her? How much? All my earnings from danger beast hunting with you, Naruto. She says with that amount I'll be promoted right away and we can have a steady supply of income for the village. Another silence. Even the whole bar was quiet, listening to Tatsumi's reasoning. Then. Ha 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 ha. Everyone in the bar was laughing. Naruto had also joined in, finding the whole situation hilarious and how easy Tatsumi was scammed. It went on for a good minute before Naruto recovered enough to respond to Tatsumi with a less than straight face. Ami, that's the weakest scam I've ever heard of. Tatsumi, as your teacher I got to say you have a lot to learn, pfff. Naruto barely kept himself from erupting into another fit of laughter as everyone in the bar continued. Huh? Tatsumi intelligently replied, confused over the whole situation. You got scammed, kid, one customer inputted. Don't expect to see that one-sen again. Or your money, another said momentarily before returning to his fit of laughs. And I was wondering why that sack seemed so familiar. It took a few seconds for Tatsumi to process everything that was being said. Suddenly his face turned from one of cheerful confusion to that of mortification. He rose from his chair, aggressively knocking it down in the process. "We have to go after her," he shouted, mortified by being tricked by breasts, "I mean lady." Naruto laughed again. "Not happening. She's long gone by now. Any thief worth their 2 cents would know when to run and where to hide. She's long gone by now." Naruto spoke yet again. "But what are we going to do about food and accommodation? You already spent your money on getting us passports." Silence. Crap was Naruto's only reply. Several hours later. "Well, looks like we'll be spending the night on the street." Naruto spoke out, depressed over resorting to sleeping on the streets again. Sure, it was easy, but it wasn't something to be proud of. Both him and Tatsumi had spent several hours looking for work, accommodation and anything that would help them get a quick buck in the city. Unfortunately, the hours were wasted and only helped to explore the vastness of the city. Naruto and Tatsumi continued to walk down the deserted street and found a spot where both could sit down, rest and plan their next move. Naruto may have experience and skill in stealing, but it just wasn't right to do so. Who knows what struggles people were going through in the capital if he and Tatsumi were going through the same. He wasn't a heartless guy, just Konoha didn't count since he knew everyone there were bastards. As Naruto and Tatsumi settled down on the pavement by the edge of the street whose name eluded them, a young blonde girl in a horse-driven carriage stopped and looked at both Tatsumi and Naruto as they spent their moment recovering. "Stop. Do those two have a place to stay?" "Again, my lady." A guard spoke. "I can't help it. That's my nature," the girl spoke cheery as she ran off to approach Naruto and Tatsumi, who continued to rest by the side of the street. The girl approached the pair, speaking out, "Do you two come from the countryside?" "Yeah," Tatsumi responded. Naruto remained silent. For some reason he felt the girl was rubbing him the wrong way and he didn't know why. Maybe it was the scent of human blood under all the perfume, but he could not picture the girl as a killer. She seemed so happy and cheerful. "If you don't have a place to stay, do you want to come to my house? We don't have any money. You wouldn't be sleeping here if you did. Lady Arya can't leave people like you two alone. You should just accept her goodwill. So what do you want to do?" "Later." "Whoa." Tatsumi and Naruto spoke out at the great view the interior of the mansion held. The mansion was extravagant. Both had never been inside one before, but he could tell class when he saw it. He looked around, noticing the various rooms upstairs and down, as well as a large staircase leading to the second floor from the main entrance. A typical mansion in layout, yet was exquisitely designed. There was a chandelier above, shining light below, several expensive-looking furniture skewed about the room, and different paintings and animal heads hung along the walls. "Ah, Arya brought someone again." The supposed father spoke up while looking at the pair. "What a habit, I wonder how many it's been now," the mother said in a happy but understanding tone. Those sentences sent ripples of warnings to Naruto's instincts. Yet again he couldn't place his tongue on why. He had learned to trust his instincts as it saved him countless times against Konoha civilians and in the countryside, so why was it acting up here? He thought it was best to keep his guard up around these people for the time being. He then glanced at the bodyguards and noticed how tense they were. Something was amiss. "Thank you very much for bringing us in," Tatsumi spoke, thanking them of their hospitality. "It's okay. Make yourself at home. If we help people out, the happiness will eventually come back to us, right? Mom? That's not the reason I'm doing this." Joking, Arya cheerfully spoke yet again. Naruto still had the inkling suspicion something was up to invite complete strangers into the house and for the members of the house to accept them openly. Sure, there were good people in the world, but they were a rare few. Not many wealthy people he met helped others this greatly. They didn't even properly check them. The next day. "We're going to that shop next." "My lady, please wait," one bodyguard spoke. "It seems we're staying home this time," another guard quipped to Naruto and Tatsumi. "Her shopping's amazing, isn't it? The amount is getting really silly now. It's not just limited to her. All girls are like that. Anyway, look up. That's the center of the capital. The palace. It's huge. Is that where the emperor who controls the country is?" "No. It's a little different. There's an emperor all right, but he's a child right now. The one who controls that emperor from the shadows is the prime minister. He is the ringleader that's rotting this country." Naruto paid attention to the conversation and chose to remain quiet while he absorbed whatever information the guard spoke. "Then the reason my village is suffering from heavy taxes. Its capital's common sense. There are guys like that as well." Guard spoke once again, pointing to several wanted posters posted up and spread across the wall. "Night Raid. It's a group of assassins that's rattling the whole capital. Just as their name implies, they conduct nocturnal attacks on their targets. They mainly target high-ranking or wealthy individuals in the capital. Prepare yourself just in case." "Yes. Nighttime." Naruto and Tatsumi woke to the feeling of bloodlust in the distance. Naruto sniffed the air again and could smell fresh blood. Someone had recently been killed. Tatsumi grabbed his sword while Naruto took his katana out of his storage seal and rushed out of the room preparing themselves for a fight. As Naruto ran, Tatsumi followed close behind. They saw a large arc window illuminated by the full moon and peered through into the distance. There they saw 5 figures, all their features pronounced on the wanted posters, while some were unknown. Night Raid, they both spoke. They're targeting this place as well because they're wealthy. Naruto and Tatsumi peered down and saw the bodyguards rushing into the field equipped with guns and hand-to-hand combat weaponry. Naruto prepared himself to jump through the window and assist them, however before he could make a move, the Night Raid member Akame had sliced one bodyguard while another was killed by Brat in his heavy Tegu armor. The final bodyguard fleeing the field was shot down from long range from what he could guess was a specialized Tegu gun. It was over in an instant, and from what he could see he would be hard-pressed taking them on from the level of teamwork skill and numbers he had just witnessed. Tatsumi, be careful. These guys are professionals from what they do. Try to avoid combat with them if at all possible. I'll see if I can buy us some time. Worst case scenario, I can take a few of them down with me. Without waiting for a reply, Naruto ran off to help protect the family, effectively splitting up with Tatsumi. He was sure Tatsumi would take his advice to heart and knew he could handle himself for a while. Naruto ran down the corridors, tuning himself to his surroundings and taking note of any noises, smells or shadows moving about. It was clear from the posters and what he saw that these people were professional assassins, comparable to Black Ops Ninja in the Elemental Nations. As he went further down the corridor, the pronounced smell of blood filled the air and bloodlust he felt was growing. As he got closer, he was just in time to see a female looking directly at him prepared for combat while the father of the family lay motionless on the floor in a puddle of blood. As he looked at the father, he noticed that his neck had been crushed with a few gashes and assumed the female to be a hand-to-hand combat fighter that utilized nails or claws. As he closely inspected the female, he noticed that she was the same one from the bar and was likely the one that scammed Tatsumi from his money. Something he still thought was well played. She, however, had a few slight differences in her appearance, as she appeared feral-like he was when under the influence of the Kyuubi. She just bore the appearance of a lion with longer feral golden hair, slit yellow eyes, and even a tail to go with the transformation. The Tegu, he assumed, one that came with physical changes. "Well, hello handsome. What's a guy like you doing with a bunch of crooks like these?" she asked in a flirty tone, either trying to have him let down his guard or her interaction just being a part of her personality. "You're the girl from the bar that scammed Tatsumi," Naruto said evenly. The girl pouted, not getting a raise out of him. "Tatsumi? Who's that?" Naruto would have faltered in his stance had it not been a serious situation. "The only crook I can see is you. You stole from us and killed people that gave us somewhere to stay. Why shouldn't I kill you?" He spoke evenly yet again. He knew something was up with the family. There were subtle signs in their conversations and movements that gave way to a more sinister plot, but he didn't know anything as of yet and couldn't form any assumptions. The lion-like female thought for a moment. "Well, I can show you proof." Naruto thought it was quite the risk to take as she could easily lead him into an ambush, but on the other hand his instincts had been going haywire ever since he entered the mansion. The malignant smell of blood and his hesitant feelings just screamed suspicion. He supposed this was the best way to get to the bottom of things. "Okay. I'll follow, but try anything and I'll attack without hesitation. What's your name, by the way?" "I'm Naruto." "Leon, cutie. Just follow me." Moments later, Naruto and Leon arrived in the yard of the mansion, immediately bearing witness to Akame and Tatsumi engaged in combat with one another and the Arya sprawled on the floor in fear. Tatsumi was loosing with a small gash in his jacket where his heart was. Naruto immediately tensed, preparing for a fight, however in the corner of his eyes, he saw Leon walk up to Akame and catch her on the scruff of the collar just before she took the final swing. "Hold up. What are you doing? We still have time, right? I owe this young lad a favor." Tatsumi looked carefully at Leon before recognizing who she was. "You're the boob," Tatsumi exclaimed unceremoniously. Clearly his head wasn't in the game, and were it not a serious situation against professional assassins, Naruto would have face-palmed at his lack of guard. "Yep, the beautiful one E-san from that time." Leon quipped, not bothered where his focus was at. "Young lad. You told us not to kill an innocent girl, but can you still say that after seeing this?" She spoke once again while heading to the entrance of the shed. The stagnant smell of blood, death and rotting corpses immediately filled the air as it rushed out the opening. Naruto could see Tatsumi's back and could tell he was shell-shocked. It was too dark to see inside from his position, so Naruto took a step forward and as his eyes began to adjust by the entrance. He now understood where the strong smell was coming from and why. He peered into the room from its top platform. Directly in front of him he could see dozens of corpses of men and women hanging off wires attached to the roof naked. Some were hanging from their legs, others by their arms. Most were missing limbs of different types, arms, legs, eyes, heads and more with blood all over their body, either dripping down or dry from time. Disgusted, but unable to direct his eyes away, Naruto peered down to the lower level and could see more corpses occupying dozens more torture platforms. Machetes and large knives of various types, torture tables, torture wheels, boards with pins, drowning glass cages, beheading platforms, spinning blades and other equipment for torture he had no idea existed were below the unassuming shed. Every corpse he looked at had an agonized expression plastered on their faces, with or without their lips. But the sound of groaning he faced the cages and could immediately tell there were some people still alive and in constant agony. He was speechless. What is this? Ailuron identified people who came from the country with their sweet words and subject them to their hobby of torture and toy with them until they die. That's the true nature of this household. Naruto continued to look around and when he looked up he saw someone he wished he didn't. Sayo. Above hanging from a wire by her arms was the tortured form of Sayo. She was naked with dry blood covering her entire body, while small amounts still oozed out. Most noticeable of all was that she was missing a leg. She had almost been unrecognizable if it were not for the flower pin on the right of her head. Naruto knew that pin as he gave it to her on her birthday as a present and she cherished it to the point that she kept it on her at all times. Naruto couldn't take it and fell to his knees. Sayo. The good friend of his who he was developing feeling for was in front of him. Dead. And from what he could see was tortured the entire way through. Her face forever plastered with pure agony. Eyes unclosed. So there was someone you know. Arya tried escaping as quietly as possible, but Naruto could hear her steps. You're not getting off the hook by running away, little lady. The people of the house did this. Tatsumi spoke up, but it was evident he had not recovered from the shock. That's right. The guards were keeping quiet about it so they're similarly guilty. But it's a lie. I didn't know there was a place like this. Arya said trying to cover up. It was hard to tell as Naruto couldn't feel any uncertainty in her voice. Are you going to believe me? The one that saved you two are these guys, Naruto, Tatsumi. Tatsumi. Naruto. It's me. Naruto looked to one of the cages and could see Ieyasu in a cage reaching out. That girl invited Sayo and me after we ate, we lost consciousness. And we were here when we came to. That girl she tortured Sayo to death. Ughh. What's so wrong? Alice spoke as if she stood on a divine platform above others. She pushed herself free from Leon and began talking in pure insanity. It was now clear what was going on. The family of the mansion was truly insane. You're just worthless hicks from the country, right? I should be free to treat them however I want. The same as cattle. Besides, that girl was so impervious for having straight hair for a farm animal. Even though I'm troubled with such unruly hair. That's why I agonized her so meticulously. In fact she should be grateful I took such good care of her. The family of sadists that takes the guise of Samaritans. Sorry for getting in your way, Akame. Leon spoke seriously. It was clear she was disgusted with what she saw and heard. Eliminate. Naruto stood back up unsealing his katana again surprising Akame and Leon in the act. He prepared himself to kill Alice. Wait. Tatsumi spoke up halting Naruto from the act while also putting his hand on the hilt of the sword on his back. He looked at him and knew the look. Tatsumi was serious and seeing he was closer to both Sayo and Ieyasu, he knew not to interfere with what would happen next. Don't tell me are you trying to defend her again? No, Tatsumi spoke evenly knowing what he was going to do and supportive of the act the entire way. I'll kill her. Tatsumi suddenly moved forward in a normal slash stance with both hands on the sword while slashing at Arya with as much power as he could. She grunted out one final time before succumbing to death. That's Tatsumi for you, that felt great, hack. Ieyasu spoke out before coughing sporadically. Ieyasu. Tatsumi and spoke out as they rushed to the cage. Naruto broke apart the bars with his brute strength while Tatsumi went in and grabbed Ieyasu. Akame spoke out looking at both of us. It's the last stages of labor disease. The mistress here enjoyed putting people on drugs and writing how they were doing in the diary. He can't be saved anymore. Naruto. Tatsumi. You know Sayo, she didn't submit to that fucking girl. Even to the very end Ieyasu began speaking out. It was so cool, so for my death, this Ieyasu-sama here will also keep it real. Ieyasu spoke out for the final time in the arms of Tatsumi as he clenched his fist with a smile on his face. Truly keeping it real to the very end. He was already in a state where he was hanging on by willpower alone. What's wrong with the capital? Tatsumi spoke remorseful with all the events transpiring within the hour. Let's go, Akame spoke evenly as if it were another job for her. Hey, why don't we bring them back with us? Our hideout's always short-handed. Leon spoke her outer thoughts while dragging Tatsumi. Naruto, unsure what to do, decided to follow, but not before sealing the bodies of Ieyasu and Seo for burial, a heavy expression on his face as he did so. "Lem go!" Tatsumi screamed out. A short while later, on the rooftops of the city, the remaining members of Night Raid could be found hanging off some wires connected across different roofs. "So they're finally back." A heavily armored man spoke, likely brought from the wanted posters. "It'd be bad if we don't retreat soon." An unknown man with distinct green hair spoke. "You're late. What were you doing?" "Who are they?" A young girl with pink hair tied in two pigtails spoke this time. Tatsumi was still thrashing as he was dragged by the collar. "Starting today you're with us. Congrats on your inaugurations into Night Raid." Leon spoke out with a feral grin with her Tigu still active. Naruto took the information in stride. If what was happening to the capital was anything to go by, along with all the corruption he saw in his travels, something needed to be done, so for the moment he took the sudden development in stride. That, and he was more focused on the sudden passing of Ieyasu and Seo. He wasn't thinking as clearly as he normally does, since those two were some of his only friends, and to know they died tortured to death saddened him. He was supposed to protect them and keep them safe. Instead he failed and it hurt. "What the hell's up with that?" Tatsumi spoke, interrupting Naruto's line of thought. "Give it up. Leon won't listen once she gets started." "As expected of my bud. You know me well," Leon said before shoving Tatsumi to the armored figure of the group. "You lackey. I leave this guy to you." "Lem go. I have no intention of becoming an assassin." "It's okay. It'll get better soon." "Mission complete. Let's return." Everyone from Night Raid began jumping across rooftops in formation, with Tatsumi in the arm of the armored member and Naruto following close by. Onwards to the new adventure. Chapter 5. Resolution. Several months have passed since the death of Seo and Ieyasu. Naruto was standing in front of their graves as he laid flowers on each of his friends' resting place. Much has happened since their death, joining Night Raid, conducting assassinations, Tatsumi's inauguration, and getting to know the members more closely. Naruto looked on at the grave and thought about the developments over the months. Everything had changed since leaving Konoha. He had experienced the pain of losing people precious to him and seen the true lengths of barbarism humanity would stoop to in the name and safety of power. Flashback. When the duo entered the hideout, Naruto immediately went about meeting the crew and getting to know them, their background and some of their more noticeable quirks. Sheer with light purple to pink eyes and hair had her cutter of creation. Ecstasy Tigu, which is a pair of giant scissors said to be able to cut anything. She is extremely talented in killing due to her open mindset, making her ruthless in combat. As such, the Revolutionary Army recruited her. Leon, who had short yellow hair and eyes, was raised in the slums of the capital and was scouted after saving slum children from being abused for sport by a group of nobles, after killed them of course. She utilizes a Tigu in the form of a belt named Lionel, which enhances her speed, reflexes, strength and regeneration, similar to his Kyubified chakra. The people, because of her half-foreign blood, ridiculed Mine, who was raised in the western borders of the empire. He learned she joined the revolution when she found out it was forming alliances with countries from the west, and with the promise of improved diplomatic relationships under a new country she entered Night Raid. Kame, who was sold as a child then raised as an assassin, eventually joined after seeing the harsh reality of the empire and was eventually persuaded by an agenda to join the revolution. She currently uses the one-cut killer Murasame, which is a long katana that is coated in cursed poison that kills anyone with its lightest cut on skin. This Tigu concerned him the most, and he wasn't entirely sure if he would survive the poison, so he thought it was best not to get cut in the first place and find out the hard way. Legenda, who is the boss of Night Raid, doesn't possess a Tigu at the moment but does have access to firing her prosthetic arm. She was once a general in the empire that defected from the empire in her expedition to eliminate the Revolutionary Army. She eventually lost her right eye and arm against another general called Estes. For some reason the name stirred him somewhat. Rabak also followed suit with Legenda's defection and wields an offensive wire Tigu named Infinite Uses. Crosstail. It is strong with many uses such as detecting intruders and can turn it into a spear to impale his enemies. He noticed his main quirk was his perverted nature, which he found funny at times. Brat, who was also a high-ranking officer in the empire known as 100-Man Slayer Brat, defected when his superior was framed for not giving in to the prime minister's agenda. Disgusted, he left and joined Night Raid. He currently uses Incursio, an armor-based Tigu that changes form depending on the person using it. When everything was resolved with Tatsumi and Naruto joining Night Raid, the security and development of their southern village was secured. Even better yet, Naruto now had enough time to continue working and developing a new sword, only this time he planned to have it mixed in with gun characteristics. Essentially he was making a prototype that was both a gun and a sword that could change between the two or act as the same in the middle of combat. He had already developed the blueprints before leaving the village and just needed a good enough forge and money to put it together. With him becoming an assassin and the financial backing of Night Raid and the Revolutionary Army, all he had to do was put his creation together. Naruto still liked the katana he currently held, but with stronger enemies showing up and him now participating in the revolution, he needed something more powerful. It didn't mean he was going to throw out the sword or give it away, it was his baby, besides he still needed it for combat because if he were seen in assassinations, the witness would be able to identify him by the uniqueness of his blade. The katana now acted more of conspicuous weapon to draw suspicion away from him when he explored the capital openly. As soon as Naruto joined Night Raid, he had begun development on new seals that would alter his appearance as he kept his mask on, while also passively placing a genjutsu on himself to ward suspicion away from his identity. The only downside was the subtle genjutsu wouldn't work on someone strong and experienced enough, and the new seal would continuously eat at his chakra reserves, meaning he had set time limits to work with. Henge was effective for hiding against targets, however he was an assault specialist, and Henge wasn't maintainable throughout combat, especially when hit. As such seals, masks and specialized clothing that hid his identity were necessary. Naruto had already purchased specialized assassination clothing during his business in hunting danger beasts risk species, after all certain species were better hunted at night than during the day, so blending into the shadows and keeping his scent different was important. His uniform was basically consisted of long black pants, long black shirt and light, but strong metal breastplate with shoulder pads and arm guards. It was similar to what most Anbu wore back in the elemental nations, but with a different shade of color and material used. Initially Naruto and Tatsumi had begun their work in Night Raid as chore boys doing all the cooking and cleaning, but as time passed Tatsumi took more and more assassination jobs, mainly with akame in mind, while also training to improve his strength and skill through other members including Leon, Sheer, Brat and himself. Naruto had already laid the foundations for strength and improvements prior to their journey, now all he needed to do was adapt it towards assassinations and stealth. So far Tatsumi had managed to assassinate one of the mercenaries that was spying on the hideout several days in joining Night Raid, the captain of the capital guards Ogre the Demon, and a bodyguard for relative of the Prime Minister Iwakaru. He even engaged and survived against a Tigu user, Zank the Beheader, and his accomplishments made Naruto proud. Overall Tatsumi had been increasing in strength exponentially while fitting into Night Raid. Naruto himself had been focusing on Fuinjutsu and creating parts for his new gun blade. He still trained in his chakra reserves in combat, but now spent most of his time taking missions alongside Leon, exploring and gathering information on the happenings of the capital. He had already easily proven himself a capable fighter when sparring against Brat and Leon, all he had to do was adapt himself to stealth assaults, as a proper Black Ops Anbu did in Konoha. When asked where he attained his skill and where he was from, he answered at the table with everyone looking at him expectantly, even Tatsumi was enthralled as he had yet to share anything on his real background and origins. Naruto told them he was from another country overseas that was recently discovered, and as a child he was beaten and ridiculed for being born on a certain day, and his involvement in a cataclysmic disaster that took hundreds of lives. He talked briefly of a biju, which he describes was similar to a risk species, but at the same time vastly different that was sealed inside of him giving him access to its chakras strengthening him. Eventually as he grew up and more truths came out including being lied to and abandoned, he left his village and country seeking a new life in the empire. Naruto kept his story brief not giving away too much detail on his origins and the specifics why he left as it may come to bite him in the back. Sure he felt bad that everyone had given his or her stories to great detail, but he wanted to stay hid until he was strong enough and they were more trustworthy. He could see everyone had a bit of suspicion, except for Tatsumi, but he'd answer their questions more closely in time. Fortunately Najenda spoke up resolving the awkwardness. Naruto, I can tell you're hiding something. Just so you know that's fine. She took a whiff of her cigarette before continuing in a serious but calm tone. We don't expect you to be open with all your secrets straight away. Trust has to be earned after all, but just so you know we are fine with it. We all have done and experienced some stuff we want kept buried, but so long as it doesn't interfere with the mission it will be fine. Flashback end. Naruto looked back on the graves of Ieyasu and Seo. He truly missed them and often had nightmares of failing them. They were now becoming less and less pronounced, but that didn't mean he was forgetting them. He just knew that those two would want Tatsumi and him to move on and create a better world for the future. He looked on for a while longer before he got up and walked back to the hideout. Later that day, Leon and Naruto were walking through the streets of another district. From the development of the houses, the missing windows and the bare dirt on the ground, he could easily tell this was one of the poorer districts, still it was an exciting sight to him. He was currently wearing a light brown shirt, a pair of blue jeans and a thick dark brown trench coat on his back. He looked at Leon and as usual she was decked out in conspicuous clothing, again emphasizing her curves and assets. White cloth arm guards held in place by golden braces. A wet scarf around her neck, black leather underwear held in place by her tegu belt and a black leather bra barely covering her assets. To top it off she wore white pants that had openings towards her crotch area, emphasizing its position and brown leather boots. When he asked out of curiosity why she wore those clothes, she responded that it was fun and liberal and it distracted men allowing her to kill them easier. That actually had him stop and think. It was a good strategy. He just didn't understand why the Kunoichi and the elemental nations didn't adapt such a strategy. He guessed it was cause they were more inclined to cover their modesty or the more likely case drew far too much attention to themselves. Leon was such a case. "Hello Leon, I could use another shoulder message." A female with a red hood and slightly revealed assets spoke up suddenly catching the duo's attention. As they walked down the streets more and more people were calling out to Leon. Clearly she was popular in the district. "Lookin' hot babe. Come drink with us tonight," one man said. "Yeah, come hang out with us," Leon, a child, added in. Naruto stopped momentarily as Leon waved back to the people calling out to her. "It's a lot livelier than the average slum, huh?" Naruto spoke, voicing his thoughts. "Souls as strong as weeds. It's what happens when you struggle to survive all your life." Leon responded, proud of the people of the slums. Sure, for the more popular people in Konoha such attention was common sight. Satsuki Uchiha, the last Uchiha, was a prime example. The only difference was she absorbed the attention like a sponge, not caring what praise she was getting. Still, it was nice to see a friendly person like Leon popular with the people. "I made a name for myself working at a local message parlor," she continued, proud of herself, before the duo's conversation was interrupted with three very angry men charging towards them. "There she is. ITS, Leon. I'll have you pay your drinking bill. It's time to settle our gambling debt. I want your money you scammed off my brother." One thought crossed Naruto's mind as he and Leon began running away from the trio of angry men. Popular indeed. As if not caring for the whole situation, she continued talking. "Whatcha think? Interesting place, huh? The air reminds me when I ran from angry people after I stole their stuff back when I was a kid. Always got away. Good times, good times." Naruto chirped in, finding the situation funny and ironic. "Really, that means we got a lot in common. Wanna trade tips after this?" Leon continued, happy while pumping her arms trying to escape. "Sure. It'll be fun," he replied, enthusiastic. Leon did possess a similar personality like his, especially when he was a kid, and just like him she was serious when she needed to be. At the Imperial Palace, audience room. "I have a report," a guardsman spoke, kneeling in front of the emperor. "It's about Generals Nakakito and Hime. They are gone. They have joined the rebel army." All the generals in the audience room grew concerned with this revelation and spoke low-key to themselves. "The military genius Nakakito has. This will make the rebel army a much bigger threat. If we don't get a handle on this, the empire will. Do not let your thoughts run away with you." The child empire stood up from his golden throne, firm with his words, while the prime minister stood behind him with a smirk. "After all, they are down in the south. We can deal with them at any time. The rebels gathering together just means they will be easier to clean up." The emperor himself wore elegant attire coupled with a white coat hung in place by a golden pin, with the empire's hat atop his head, only worn by the emperors of old. The prime minister himself was fat, incredibly so, wearing official clothing with a large white coat that emphasized his belly. In addition, he had a mustache and unruly hair, but what was most noticeable was he had 3 black horns sticking out his head. One in front where his forehead is and 1 horn by each ear. After his speech, the young emperor looked back at the prime minister, cheerful at his job well done. "So did I handle that well, prime minister?" Ifufu was the minister's response as he bit into a piece of meat and began chewing. "As always, your majesty is a mountain of calm in a sea of chaos." The minister spoke up again and continued to do so, addressing other issues. "We have a closer problem than some faraway rebel army. This is the problem we should be focusing on. The leader of the Imperial Guard assassinated, my own relative Ikaru dead. Even that serial killer was killed by night raid and they kept his tegu. I want them dealt with so badly. I've been so obsessed with this, I've gained weight." He spoke again, aggressively biting into a large chunk of meat and chewing it with vigor. "Well, what of them?" The emperor spoke up. "Are there not professionals searching for their hideout? They haven't been in contact. They're probably dead, but I have another plan." The prime minister spoke, calming down from his frustration fit. "I've already called in someone reliable to help me express my uncontrollable rage. The one who is currently subjugating the northern tribes will return as soon as she is finished." He continued. "I have called for General Estes to return to the capital. He spoke calmly, assured of his plan. The generals were in shock and fear of the woman. One spoke his thoughts but Grand General Budu is in command of the capital forces, is he not? But to ask the Grand General to do something as low as hunting rebels would be an unforgivable wound to his pride, would it not? The minister calmly replied while continuing his moral-boosting speech. She is a hero that rivals the power of General Budu. I'm relieved. She is the ice-hearted woman who executed 400,000 enemies by burying them alive. She will bring to task the hopelessly incompetent Imperial Guard. This is no longer a question of life and death. These animals are getting stronger day by day. She will hunt them down and kill them all. The Prime Minister finalized his speech, clenching his fist forward with an angry, almost insane expression on his face, clearly showcasing his might. Later that night in the red light district, Naruto and Leon stood on one of the rooftops of the red light district. The architect of the buildings were again vastly different, being that much closer to elemental nation design, with prioritization of wood and paper. The duo looked down at the busy streets illuminated by light sprawled by the sides of walkways. It was nighttime and as expected the district was busy. Down below and from openings by the side of buildings, both could see countless women either waiting or entertaining guests through sake, alcohol, smoking, singing or talking. Just by looking, Naruto could tell there were far more women than there were men, further detailing the desperation of the capital civilians. All were working hard trying to make money or find entertainment for the night. So this is the red light district of the capital. Sure is big. Definitely makes your heart beat faster. Naruto spoke, slightly blushing. Sure, he had been at red light districts, he even lived in one for a time in Konoha, but the extent the capital had easily outmatched them in design, size and number of people. That straightforwardness is kind of cute. Leon spoke, standing firm for their mission. Okay then. Time to work. I've got debts to pay, she spoke. Naruto equipped his combat gear, his standard infiltration gear with a breastplate, arm and shoulder and leg guards with dark black leather boots. He hadn't finalized his appearance alternation seal or his new gun blades, still in construction, but he was sure he wouldn't need either for the occasion. There weren't any significantly difficult targets, so he could get in and out without being noticed and reported by bystanders. For now his identity was safe. Naruto looked to his right and watched as Leon activated her Tigu transform Lionel. Immediately her wares began to change, almost disintegrating, while a tail sprouted out her rear. She grew ears atop her head while her hair grew longer and wild in appearance. Most noticeable was the change in her eyes and arms. Her pupils had changed into thin slits, similar to his change, except thinner, and her arms now sprouted lion-like hands with fur and nails. Alright, changing into this form always gets me excited. She spoke, ready for combat, while Naruto was in the background lightly clapping and blushing. Okay. Let's sneak in. We've got killing to do, Naruto. Naruto quickly put on his blank mask, preparing himself for the assault. As the seals and changes to the mask weren't complete, his sun-kissed blonde hair and lightly tanned skin was still a noticeable trait, especially when it was foreign genetics. He needed to get his stealth equipment updated as soon as possible, or his identity would be compromised. Suddenly Leon grabbed Naruto by the neck and jumped from the roof towards an open entrance at phenomenal speed. Naruto gauged as he tried to breath through the stranglehold and watched as they sped behind the guard and into the rooftop's opening. The guard being none the wiser. Phew, made it, Leon spoke, cheery and proud of her accomplishment, while Naruto was on the ground refilling his lungs with air. That was not sneaking in, you just charged through the front. Naruto breathed in and out, speaking low and raspy. Still, I guess I would have done the same. Leon spoke, moving on towards the objective. Over here, over here. Hurry it up. Look, she spoke much more quietly as she moved a wooden board to the side to allow her and Naruto to peer down below. Both looked through the board and immediately noticed the odor in the air. As they looked down, Naruto noticed dozens upon dozens of women lying about the floor, matted with wood. Some were naked, others clothed, while most were half naked with clothes slightly falling off. What was noticeably important was the large golden cauldron, the smoke in the air and the pipe several women were smoking out of. Drugs, Naruto thought as he looked on at the women. As he looked closer at their faces, he noticed that most had blank eyes, as if enthralled by the drug and the smell of the room. He had to stop himself from vomiting from the mixed smell of drugs and sex. A few seconds passed and two men walked into the room via thick paper doors. One had a small mustache with a distinct eye patch on his right eye, while the other wore a noticeable business suit and tie. Both had an expression of might and arrogance on their faces. Oh who? Very nice. Very nice. The man with the eye patch spoke. It was becoming clearer and clearer from his get-up that he was high up in the ladder of the organization. He spoke again with a distinct cheer to his voice. Hey there, girls. If you keep earning money well, I'll make sure to send around some more medicine. Alright, girls. Okay, YY was the unison response. "Boss, take a look at this one," the grunt spoke up as he looked towards an unresponsive girl lying down on the floor with a very small and revealing yukata, emphasizing her curves and assets. "Ah, damn it. This one's done. She smells like fish. She's broke." The now identified boss spoke. A slight hint of frustration in his tone. "Ah, I need some of your drugs," the female managed to speak out, her eyes devoid of life, while she pressed her assets onto the leg of the grunt. "Deal with her. We'll get a new one to take her place," the leader said, uncaring and looking back at the crowd of girls. Suddenly, without warning, the grunt punched the girl, breaking her already fragile neck and effectively killing her. This sudden atrocious action immediately surprised and angered the duo. Naruto's eyes subconsciously turning into slits as Kurama's chakra poured through him in anger. "We'll have to call up another stupid bitch from the slums, right?" The grunt spoke calmly while wiping his fists on a white rag. "Yeah. Those good-for-nothings will do anything as long as they get paid after all." "But bastards, unforgivable," Naruto growled out, trying to contain his anger and prevent a rampage. Leon was silent for a few seconds before she spoke in a low but dangerous tone. "The one he just hit was someone I knew from the slums." Suddenly Leon and Naruto stood up. Fury evident on Leon's face while Naruto's remained unseen behind his mask and slowly pulling out his katana from its sheath. "They make me sick, let's put an end to their business. Permanently." Leon spoke with fury as she cracked her knuckles. "With pleasure." Moments later at the gangster meeting. The grunt in the business suit spoke. "Boss, it's about time we expand our drug delivery route, don't you think? Drew, I wonder if we should go over to Chibil-sama's place to discuss it," the boss spoke as a half-naked girl served him sake. Suddenly. Boom. The roof of the room exploded downward, surprising the boss, his various grunts and co-workers. Naruto and Leon appeared in the room and with cold fury spoke. "The only place you two are going is hell." The grunts in black immediately sprung into action. The head grunt leading the "My intruders. Kill them." Naruto immediately rushed forward, taking on 5 at once, and with great efficiency and speed, cut them in half with wind chakra imbued swings, a cold and furious expression on his face behind the mask. Leon, however, stood still, waiting to be surrounded. "Our targets are the drug smuggling ringleaders, but you share their guilt," she spoke in cold fury. Then her tone rose with clear anger as her nails became more pronounced, "So you can all die together." Immediately a barrage of punches followed, each landing on a critical point in the body, then she kicked them all at once, smashing them onto the wall at great velocity, making a small crater and effectively killing them. But the power shown, an executive in the organization went crazy, taking out a handgun and aiming it at Leon. "Don't fuck with me. If you think I'm going down that easily, you've got another." But the executive wasn't able to complete his sentence or open fire as his upper body was cut off with Naruto appearing in front of the now dead man. Leon instead went directly to the boss, capturing his neck in her lion-like hands and began choking him. He began begging, trying to find middle ground to ensure his survival. "What do you want? Money? Drugs? I'll give you whatever you want if you just let me go." Leon spoke calmly, her hair covering her eyes in her fury. "I don't want either of those things. What I want from you is your life." As she finished her cold fury speech, a feral grin appeared on her face. Who the hell are you guys? We're nobodies." Leon brought her fist back, pouring power into the punch. From where he could see, Naruto noticed the change in wind as she did so, and when she let loose her punch, just like a spring, the power behind it was great. The boss was immediately propelled through the air, destroying the back wall. As Naruto looked on, he could see an apparent hole in his torso where Leon had punched and the blood dripping out of the dead man's mouth. Therefore, disposing of society's trash suits us just fine. 1 hour later, as Leon and Naruto began their journey back to Night Raid. "So what's going to happen to all those broken down girls now?" Naruto spoke, getting her attention. "That's not our problem, is it? But there's an old doctor in the slums they can be taken to, though he isn't that skilled. We'll see him and explain the situation. He's got a thing for young girls, so I'm sure he'll be happy to help." "Leon, Ni-san. Heh. Say what you want, but you're a kind person at heart, aren't you?" "It's only because I know some of them. Whatever the reason is fine. As long as they get a chance in life, it's all good." Naruto spoke, happy with his famous grin. Leon blushed as a result. "Naruto. I've thought this from the beginning," but Leon began slowly and softly. "When you make that sort of face, it's really cute," she spoke as she licked Naruto on the cheek. "Ahawa. Yufufu, I was literally marking you." She spoke in her firm pose, a blush on her cheeks. "If you grow up to be a good man, you're mine." Meanwhile, in the Northern Lands fortified city. The Northern Lands fortified city and people were advanced in terms of technology, but not overtly so like the Empire. They possessed electricity and appliances, as well as pipelines for sewerage and water. Although crude, their infrastructure designs allowed for multiple levels of residence and additional construction atop the roof. At the center stood the fortified city, walls stretching at least 100 meters high with pipes and armaments along its sides. But what stood out about the city was that it was frozen in a big block of ice, as if it had been buried inside a glacier. The truth, however, was far more frightening. Below in the various buildings surrounding the city, bodies of northern military personnel equipped with winter jackets and gas masks were sprawled around the snowing city, frozen in ice blocks and expressions unreadable behind the masks. In various areas, pikes had been set up vertically with men and women either skewered onto them or tied on. All were bleeding profusely or had blood drying all around them. Most were naked, exposing them to frostbite, others had some clothing on, but did nothing to limit the cold, making their deaths slow, long and agonizing. The more lucky ones were already dead before being set on. What was truly disturbing were their faces. Their eyes and mouths were stitched shut. No screams or pleas for help ever leaving their throats, and death meeting them in complete darkness. They were set up as a reminder of the might of the empire. In front of the fortified city's entrance sat the general. A chain was in her right hand linked to a dog collar on the neck of the man kneeling and licking her boots. The man was Numasika, hero of the north, and he was currently naked with blood drying all around his body. Desperate for his life, he acted like a dog, tongue sticking out his mouth and a permanent blush on his face, likely from the cold. The northerners were defeated in a blink of an eye. "That's our general for you," one soldier said. Estes sighed. Their army, people and pride were so easily crushed, and this is their supposed hero. How worthless. "Die, dog." She spoke bored as she kicked the once mighty hero in the head with her metal-tipped high-heeled boots, killing him and spraying his blood across the pavement. She put her foot down, stood up and walked to the exit of the city's outer rim, her highly equipped and well-experienced army following behind her. Each soldier had their own custom weapon for combat, specialized guns, spears, and swords. One soldier in particular was over 9 meters tall. All of them were distinguished soldiers equipped with Empire winter trench coat uniforms and standard metal hats. "Somewhere out there, is there an enemy that can satisfy me?" She spoke with power, authority and confidence. Hope you're ready, boy. I'm coming for you." Estes, sadist and the Empire's strongest. Back in the elemental nations 1 year ago, just forgot to add it into the last chapter. Satsuki and Naruto in the Valley of the End. 3 years had passed since Naruto had left the village, and Naruto and Satsuki were facing off in the Valley of the End. Naruto was trying to prevent Satsuki from defecting to Orochimaru, and Satsuki trying to escape towards him with promises of power. Over the years, the girls filled out nicely, appearing beautiful in their own way. Naruto more Fira-like with her whisker marks on her cheeks and her blonde hair tied up in 2 pigtails, one on either side of her head. Satsuki on the other hand had her more homely features with feral black long hair and pale skin. Over the years, the two had developed a rivalry to the point it was hard to tell if they were friends. Both wanted to see Naruto again, but both were against dating each other and the way to go about it. Naruto still stood by her family and Konoha, hoping to become Hokage and find their lost brother and make things right. Satsuki on the other hand wanted Itachi dead through power and developed the idea of seeking Naruto on her own without Konoha's aid. After all, she expected Naruto to stay well away from them. Over the years, both had trained extensively, becoming the most powerful of their class, along with Hinata, and over time it became apparent that they were even in terms of power. Satsuki had her fully matured bloodline, along with various fire and lightning techniques, including Chidori and additional variations, while Naruto had her chakra chains, Rasengan and other water-based ninjutsu techniques, acquired from mother. The Namikaze family was still torn over what had happened to Naruto and still looked wherever they could. Hiruzen Sarutobi took his disappearance the hardest as he was there during his stay in Konoha, while Tsunade and Jiraiya, although slightly affected, were now in bad terms with the family and were doing their best to make it up. The majority of Konoha itself was saddened over what they had done and sought to at least make amends in some way, especially since Minato and Kushina were being extra hard on them. There were still some people that didn't like Naruto, but eventually they too were shunned. Truly, humans worked in mysterious ways. So far there had been little to no success in finding the whereabouts or even a rumor of Naruto, but the family kept trying. Naruto and Satsuki charged one last time. Satsuki had weakened her enough, allowing her to land the final blow, driving her to unconscious before escaping to Orochimaru. Naruto collapsed on the ground unconscious from a combination of exhaustion and her wounds. It would only be several minutes later that Kakashi and Kushina show up while concluding the failure of the retrieval mission. Kushina picked up Naruto and alongside Kakashi journeyed back to Konoha, saddened at the development of Mikoto's child. Things were developing in the elemental nations and soon the collision of cultures would follow. Chapter 6. Elemental Development. Konoha and the Elemental Nations Summary, 4 years till present day and 3 years after Naruto's disappearance. Time continued to pass since the disappearance of Naruto and the return of the Namikaze family, yet things were still tense between the family and the villagers. The mistreatment of Naruto and his eventual leaving still stung the family, resulting in Minato, Kushina, Naruko and even Hiruzen lashing out at the villagers subtly and directly. Kushina had reacted badly the first few days, issuing her own form of justice by finding the people most responsible for his mistreatment and beating the crap out of them. She made it perfectly clear that the Red Death of Konoha was back and in action. She took Naruto's mistreatment and his leaving hard, as she was the former Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails and was ostracized in her youth. Sure, the civilians at the time didn't know she held the Kyuubi at bay, but she was seen as a foreigner with her red hair and chubby face. She knew the feeling of being alone and made fun of for something beyond her control, and she took a different path in her youth, acting as an aggressive tomboy and lashing out at anyone that made fun of her. As a result, she didn't have many friends and only stayed close to Mikoto Uchiha, who respected her and acted as her rival, and eventually Minato after the attempted kidnapping of Kumo. As she continued to delve deeper into Naruto's suffering, his personality and approach to his problems, she saw a child in need that did pranks for attention. He approached his problems far different from her, taking a less aggressive approach, sucking up his problems and dealing with it as best as he could. She noticed he trained alone and had little to no support from his teachers, except from the one called Iruka. However, he had watched him die by a traitor of the village as he revealed his deep dark secret. She noticed in the reports that although things were bad for Naruto, he continued to smile and stay positive, and it truly made her proud and sad. Proud her son was turning out to be a kind and strong person with a great personality, and sad that she had nothing to do with it. Worse yet, she may be the one responsible for crumbling away his pure nature and turning it into something disastrous. She needed to find Naruto and make it up to him as soon as possible. For the time being, Kushina spent her time at home watching and training Narumi in the basics of chakra and combat while she herself revamped her skills. She had plans to become a Jonin again and alongside Naruko find their wayward son and make things right. She knew Narumi understood why things were the way they were and expected Minato to watch over her once she was back in the ninja fighting force. Narumi agreed that this was best and she herself began training hard in hopes of one day reuniting the family. Minato, on the other hand, didn't directly beat the crap out of the villagers responsible for the mistreatment of Naruto, but instead took it out in paperwork and official investigations. The first thing Minato did as Kage once again was address the growing corruption rooted in Konoha and Fire Country and brutally deal with the problem. It turns out that a majority of people that mistreated Naruto the most were involved in corruption in one way or another, ranging from bribery to the eliciting of drugs and illegal good. Sometimes he came across cases of Fire Country citizens sharing secrets to foreign shinobi and enemies of Konoha. Following a long and brutal investigation and its eventual conclusions, those convicted, they eventually paid a visit to Ibiki Marino and Anko Mitarashi for torture and interrogation before meeting their end in the public execution platform. Keeping children away, of course. At first, the civilian members of council spoke out in an uproar, but as the days pass on, they too were found to play a hand in corruption and with evidence were also convicted, tortured and executed. It turned out that a majority was delving their hands in gold and greed, doing what they liked behind Sarutobi's back. They too paid for their crimes and their wealth converted back into Konoha's financial reserves. Now the civilian council was composed of people that looked out for the good of Konoha and Fire Country civilians. Sure, there were a few members that had played a hand in Naruto's mistreatment, but Minato and Hiruzen knew they were truly remorseful for their actions and were doing their best to make up for it. Still, a close eye was kept on them. Time progressed and Minato began rebuilding diplomatic relations with neighboring countries and allies of Konoha, including Tokigakure and Suna, although things are still tense with Suna. The more minor nations surrounding were also seeing Konoha as the key player, particularly with the return of Minato to power, and in the case of war, although unlikely, were more inclined to support Konoha. For the rest of the major countries, Minato had begun supplying weapons and materials to the rebels in Water Country while initiating Black Ops operations. This was done discreetly, of course, as complete involvement would destroy the sovereign rights of the nation and initiate a bad reputation for Konoha, regardless if Yagura's regime was generally seen as evil with baby killings, open torture and executions of bloodline users and supporters. Minato hoped that with the victory of the rebellion, diplomatic relations with Konoha would become favorable, eventually leading to an alliance. Iwa and Kumo were starting to see Konoha as a major threat, again with the return of Minato, and in case of war, had created a defensive pact between the two, although that was very loose as neither side liked each other, with constant border confrontations and attempted kidnappings of Kumo for strong shinobi. Kumo, although in bad relation with Konoha due to the attempted kidnapping of the Hyuga heiress, still engaged in diplomacy, agreeing that war should be avoided at all cost. The diplomatic meeting was quite the sight between A. Cage of Kumo bringing his 2 Jinchuriki, B of the 8 tails and his brother and young Yujito of the 2 tails and his adopted daughter. Minato however brought along Hiruzen previous Cage of Konoha and his wife Kushina, Red Death of Konoha. Things started out tense seeing that Kushina had bad experiences with Kumo, but as the Cage knew and respected one another having engaged each other during the Third Ninja War, the tenseness settled down. Eventually a non-aggression treaty was signed and although things were still tense between the two countries, a working relationship was developing. Talks of trade happening between the two were on the rise. Iwa on the other hand remained stubborn to the end, declining any form of diplomatic agreement between the two nations. Inoki still resented Minato for having destroyed Iwa's shinobi column in the Third War. No one was sure where relations of Iwa would go with only time telling. Hiruzen took the leaving of Naruto the worst. Being a father and grandfather himself he knew he should have looked out for him more. Having believed he failed to provide for the boy he had openly searched the border and surrounding countries for any signs or rumors of his whereabouts, all for naught. Eventually as old age caught up to him and he returned to Konoha distraught over his failure and inability to be the figure Naruto needed growing up as he focused on the betterment and safety of the village. As time passed this phase eventually turned into conviction to change things and make things right. Too long had Konoha delved into stupidity behind his back, diminishing his sensei's will of fire, so with his new conviction, he played a more active role in correcting problems around the country and inside Konoha. Although Minato Namikaze was now acting Cage Hiruzen played a major role as an advisor and in backing him from the sidelines by establishing his authority and support with the shinobi clans and their leaders. Although his direct involvement in the village has been reduced, the more free time he had allowed him to improve his work quality and alongside Minato, stamped out corruption. He continued to play a major role on the council, acting as the key advisor, while at the same time increasing his training and involvement of Konohamaru's life. He had made mistakes in the past, but it was never good to delve into them forever, after all the next generation shouldn't suffer for his mistakes. These days it was more accurate to say there were 2 acting cages who were strict on the happenings of the village. With the greater logistics and growth the development of the Fire Country skyrocketed, reaching beyond the initial phases of the founding of Konoha. Shinobi and civilian curriculums began improving and advanced beyond the basics, allowing for a range of improvements to take place. It no longer catered just towards clan heirs and the privileged, for instance the basic 3 for graduation, henge, kawarimi and clone, were no longer enough. Each graduate was required to know at least an additional 3 combative justus and be able to satisfy a chunin instructor in a fight. Additionally there were now after-school classes available to further advance and improve the students' capabilities. Junin and Jonin were strengthened and improved with better training regimes, with access to greater equipment and techniques. As years passed more and more were pumped into the shinobi forces and with better quality to the point that the build-up was just below pre-war output. Normally this would frighten other countries, but as corruption and spies were stamped out the neighboring nations remained none the wiser. Better yet the daimyo samurai armies improved logistically and strength was improving. Talks of upgrading weaponry and equipment manufacturing began to increase as the future approached. All this was possible under the banner of both Hiruzen and Minato. Fire Country was now completely seen as the strongest in the elemental nations and Konoha the strongest shinobi village. As the change and improvement in logistics occurred, Root was eventually rediscovered again. In response Minato and Hiruzen put their fists down on the matter, engaging with Danzo and the elders on the issue. Both had basically said that as long as they conducted missions approved by the Cage and were loyal to Konoha and himself, Danzo can maintain and train his troops, however certain conditions had to be met, such as the inhuman conditioning of the forces no longer being permitted. The reason for the leniency was simply because Danzo had worked for the greater good of Konoha, no matter how dark, and Minato could see the logic behind his moves. Danzo and the elders accepted seeing no other alternative, besides under the influence of Minato conditions of Konoha and Fire Country were significantly greater than before. Now Danzo was responsible for aiding the bloodline supporters and conducting covert mission against Yugura, with the population being none the wiser. Jiraiya and Tsunade eventually returned having heard of the Namikaze's return and were greeted with scorn from the family and a painful fist from Minato and Kushina. Jiraiya knew Minato was alive from the Toad contract and explained that he had a sophisticated spy network to maintain for the safety and security of Konoha. He couldn't bring along Naruto as the danger would be too great and he would be recognizable by enemy shinobi as the offspring of the Namikaze. Logically it was a sound excuse, however the family were still extremely angry at his neglect of Naruto. He still maintained his network outside Konoha, but at times would visit the family and do his best to show his remorse and improve his relationships. Sometimes he can be seen training Naruto and eventually gave her the right to sign the Toad contract just like her father. Jiraiya kept an open ear for any sign of Naruto in the elemental nations. When Tsunade returned, she was in a much worse position than Jiraiya, as she had been drinking and gambling her life away when Hiruzen found her. She was eventually dragged back to Konoha by the ear, it's an expression, followed closely by Shizune. She knew Naruto was alive, but did nothing to help his situation, nor have any excuse to back her up as she wallowed in her depression. It took a great deal of tongue lashing from Minato, Kushina and Hiruzen to wake her up after breaking down in tears. Over time she grew more remorseful of her actions and did what she could to make up for her mistakes. She wanted to see Naruto and apologize for her neglect and now spends her time developing and improving Konoha and Fire Country's medical department. Eventually she would come to take on 2 apprentices in addition to Shizune, Sakura Haruno and Hinata Hyuga. Kakashi Haddock, although happy with the return of his teacher, was saddened by the loss of Naruto. True, he wasn't close to the kid directly, but he was one of the Anbu assigned to protect him at times and he did. He couldn't be there all the time as he was a Black Ops Anbu and he was the next one powerful after Hiruzen and Itachi, as such he was an important resource. He discreetly helped Naruto when he could, leaving money, food and other important needs when he could. Being open was not permitted under the guise of an Anbu. Naruko spent her time in school training and had done so for several years. She worked hard with dreams of bringing his brother back, apologizing and making things right for the family. She had focused hard in her studies, making her intelligent, however far from the intelligence of her father at her age, as well as improving her ninjutsu reservoir, allowing her to conduct several water-based techniques and effectively use the Rasengan and Shadow Clone, not as much as Naruto can. As time progressed she made friends with the other clan heirs, but of particular importance was her friendship and permanent rivalry with Satsuki and Hinata. Satsuki continued her studies with extra vigor, eventually being taken up by a Jonin instructor, Kakashi Haddock, seeing himself and Obito's relationship similar to Naruto and Satsuki, after classes allowing her to learn and develop further, while quickly catching up to her rival's capabilities. She was able to learn additional fire-based ninjutsu and develop her second affinity for lighting in the form of the Chidori with several variants. Hinata eventually became more vigorous in her work and studies after finding out the truth of her idol and crush Naruto and his eventual departure. She worked tirelessly on the Byakugan and gentle fist techniques of her clan, developing her combat ability to the point it rivals both Naruto and Satsuki's abilities. She doesn't possess ninjutsu or genjutsu capabilities, but she is seen as the strongest Taijutsu fire of the class. She dreams of meeting Naruto again and eventually becoming heiress to remove the slave seal of the clan. The relationship between the three started out rough, with Satsuki and Hinata disliking Naruto for her role in the abandonment of Naruto, while Satsuki and Hinata already had a distinct dislike for one another, Hinata, with Satsuki having Naruto's attention, while Satsuki seeing her frail and weak at the time. Eventually the dislike developed into a rivalry where the trio would try to outdo one another. After graduating Naruto, Satsuki and Hinata were set into a team with 2 Jonin instructors, Kushina Namikaze and Kakashi Haddock. The team was seen as strong, already having a great background in combat, but almost failed the teamwork bell test over their petty rivalry. Still, the rivalry was seen as a friendship in a way, and they eventually developed into a working team. Time passed and they conducted many missions, from the constant D-rank missions in Konoha to the events in Wave Country, eventually leading to the Great Naruto Bridge. Here they learned the deeper importance of being a ninja, with the death of Haku and Zabuza, further increasing their drive. As the Chunin exams approached, they were clearly ready, as with the other graduates of their class. Certain important events happened in the Chunin exams, from the trio's encounter with Orochimaru, the curse seal on Satsuki, the draw of Hinata and Niji's in the semi-finals, the encounter with Gaara, the participation of the Ujido, and Inoki's granddaughter Kuretsuchi. In the finals the most surprising event happened, the invasion of Konoha by Sound Ninja and the betrayal of Suna. Orochimaru had trapped the cage, including Minato, Hiruzen and Inoki, in a barrier and used the Ito Tensei to bring back the first and second cage for a fight. He had expected and Inoki to side with him and crush Konoha as the chance presented itself, however instead was met with a unified front of cages against him, leading to a temporary alliance between and the eventual defeat of Suna and Sound. Orochimaru, however, still managed to get away. At this time Kushina, Naruto and Satsuki worked together to bring down Gaara and Ichibi, using chakra chains, Gamma Banta and the occasional jutsu from Satsuki. It eventually turned out that Orochimaru had killed the Suna cage and posed as him during the exams for the destruction of Konoha, as such leniency was given to Suna for their actions, and Konoha begun helping them rebuild their losses. Eventually, as Suna recovered, a cage was needed. The newly reformed Gaara took the seat, working hard to improve Suna and Wind Country, allowing it to prosper. But the aid provided with Inoki and relations improved for a time, with the expectation of peace and the unification of the continent. This however was not to last as Kiri eventually finalized their civil war, leading to the victory of the bloodline users and execution of Yugura's fanatical supporters. Mate Terumi took the stage as Kage and Daimyo as the economy was destroyed and the prior water daimyo was dead. The country was under a loose military rule for a time to kickstart growth and development economically. As a proper daimyo was established, Mei and Water Country immediately went about creating an alliance with Fire Country. This did nothing but increase tensions between the two military blocks of Iwa and Kumo against Konoha, Suna and Kiri. To make things worse, the Akatsuki have been semi-active in establishing themselves across the smaller nations. Itachi still acted as a spy feeding Konoha information, but so far their focus was identifying and locating the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Apparently they too were at a loss to his location. As time passed and more missions taken by the team including protecting the Princess Koyuki, developments in the Crescent Moon Kingdom, and the legend of the Jewel Stone. Over time Satsuki's began to see herself falling behind Naruko and Hinata. Hinata eventually had Tsunade teaching her medical techniques and attacks that could be adapted to the gentle fist style, while Naruko began moving on to the Namikaze and Uzumaki's specialty, Fuinjutsu. As she saw herself falling behind, she was eventually swayed by Orochimaru to defect from the Leaf and learn under the Sannin. Sure, he had lost in the invasion, but he fought, injured and survived against 4 Kage level ninja. That was an impressive feat in of itself. Satsuki took the offer and defected. Naruko, Hinata, replaced Niji here, and various friends and class graduates took off for the retrieval. At the time most capable Jonin and Chunin were sent to the Sound Front as Sound Shinobi launched an attack. This meant that only the genin were available for retrieval, besides they weren't expecting Sound Ninja to be aiding in the escape. The retrieval squad eventually encountered the Sound 4 and Kimimaro the Bone User engaging them in battle. No one from the retrieval team had died, rather had been significantly injured with their encounters. Eventually Naruko caught up to Satsuki and they fought in the Valley of the End, Naruko standing on Hashirama's statue while Satsuki on Madara's. Naruko had lost the battle that day. If you want an explanation why I did this, read final comments. Present day Night Raid hideout. As the sun rose for the new day, things at the moment weren't looking good for Night Raid. Everyone was outside as Mine was bloodied, battered and injured as she delivered the bad news. Sheer was dead. Killed in combat. Everyone in Night Raid was downcast, having already expected losses in time. Sheer was Night Raid's first victim. Most members were downcast as they processed the information. Rabak was openly crying, hand and face trying his best to hold back his tears. Naruto remained downcast, his golden bangs covering his eyes. He was already expecting something like this to happen as taught in his brief time in Ninja Academy. He supposed he was lucky for not having known Sheer all too closely. Still, it hurt to know a comrade had died in such a gruesome manner. Beaten by a Tigu. Itsumi took the situation far differently than everyone else, having been close to Sheer in a more personal manner. Looking at it, it was an expected reaction. He was still new to the death of comrades in battle. He himself went through a similar phase with the death of Iruka and his killing by Mizuki, the only difference was he got his revenge immediately after. Itsumi wouldn't. Where is the person who did it? Mine. Tatsumi spoke, cold fury evident in his tone and his desire for revenge, lapsing his judgment. What do you intend to do, Tatsumi? Nagenda spoke calmly, pain and loss evident in her voice. Teeth gritting in anger and frustration, he looked back in fury. It's obvious, isn't it? Revenge. Stop. If you go off half-cocked, all you will be doing is increasing the body count. Nagenda spoke calmly with a strong hint of frustration. Hey, our friend was killed. Do you think I'm just going to sit here and stay silent? Tatsumi shouted while tears poured out his eyes. Brat punched Tatsumi in the face, pushing several meters away from his original position. Tatsumi stared back at Brat. Stop acting like a child, Tatsumi. Compose yourself. When did anyone ever say that we couldn't be harmed or killed? You knew this could happen when you joined us. Brat shouted back, fury and authority evident in his voice. Naruto spoke, not to criticize Tatsumi, but rather in an effort to comfort him and impart knowledge from his experience. Tatsumi. I know it hurts and I know you were closer to her than me, but this is a cruel world, Night Raid is a product of its cruelty. Be thankful she fought to the end. Everyone was distraught over the loss, and morale was dropping. As the leader tasked to ensure moral, Nagenda spoke with strength and authority, Sheer's death was certainly not pointless. The Empire will now finally understand it takes a Tigu to fight a Tigu, and they will now bring in more Tigu users to fight for them. But what this means for us is that the chances to collect more Tigu will increase. Also, this is the real beginning of the life and death struggle. Outside the capital. Far into the distance by a cliff overlooking the capital's outer wall and forests, a dragon danger beast along with 3 figures in cloaks looked on into the distance. Of striking importance was the female figure that sat atop the danger beast, tall and confident, long blue hair flickering in the wind. She sat with chain in hand as if it were some sort of pet. The female looked onto the distance at the capital and the large palace reaching up into the sky. "I'm home. Capital. Amak. Tatsumi and the Itigu." Legenda was on the chair sitting down and about addressed Tatsumi after his recovery from the fight with Zank the Beheader. Surrounding him at the sides were the members on night raid curious at the development. Naruto himself was there leaning upon a wall by the side of a window, also curious about what was happening. "Tatsumi, your wounds are pretty healed, right?" spoke Legenda as she hunched forward and addressed Tatsumi casually. "The Tigu we took from Zank. I want you to try using it," she continued as she held out the eye-like Tigu with her mechanical arm. "Really? No one else wants it?" Tatsumi spoke, excited in acquiring the power of a Tigu. He had seen what they could do from the members and knew how powerful they truly were. Brat spoke up, showcasing his wide healthy teeth and massive hairdo. "I don't know what it is. Mohawk. It's only one Tigu per person." Rabak butted in because it takes considerable mental and physical strength to control them. Tatsumi reached out towards the Tigu and for a moment stared at it with a happy expression on his face before placing it on his forehead, and nothing happened. "It has the ability to read minds, right? Try reading me." Akame spoke, also showcasing her calm excitement while decked out in her black assassin dress. "There was nothing about it in the book, but it's a Tigu after all, so I'm curious to see what it does," Negenda continued while taking a whiff of her cigarette. Tatsumi concentrated hard, head up high and trying to read whatever was on Akame's mind. "You want to eat meat tonight?" he spoke with vigor and concentration. "Exactly, amazing." Akame spoke in calm excitement. It was hard to tell if she meant it or was a form of sarcasm. Naruto and Leon were sweat dropping at the scene in front of them. Their interaction was comical. "I don't want him to read my mind. If it really has 5 different side abilities, try one of the other ones." Mine spoke up casually with arms crossed. Naruto didn't know what was going on, but Tatsumi started freaking out with a huge blush on his face. He knew that blush. It was his innocent expression he had when he was seeing something perverted, like when he saw Seo in a hot spring bath. Wait, perverted? Different sights? Naruto paused, shocked and unable to comprehend what to think or say. Here was Tatsumi innocently practicing with a Tigu to only find it could look through clothes. The thought crossed his head, couldn't the Byakugan do the same? Naruto guessed he'd best say nothing and wait it off, besides he could tease him later on seeing Akame naked. Suddenly. "Oh no, it's rejecting." Rabak spoke, noticing the sudden tiredness with Tatsumi. "Hurry and take it off." Akame spoke, worried. What's going on? I suddenly feel tired." Tatsumi spoke on the ground, having collapsed from sudden exhaustion. "It's the compatibility, it seems the Tigu isn't suited for you." Negenda spoke casually yet again. Mine inputted her thoughts in her usual lecturing manner. "You were thinking about how uncool it looked or something, weren't you? The user's first impression of the Tigu is important, you know." Negenda picked up the Tigu and looked at Naruto. "Naruto, your turn. Try it on." "Sorry. Won't work. Tigu aren't compatible with chakra users. They simply don't recognize us at all." He replied calmly, having discovered it was not him that was responsible for its non-interaction, rather the power of chakra he possessed. "Why's that?" "Don't know. Maybe cause we use energy in our bodies and both aren't compatible." "Sigh, this will need to be sent to the Revolutionary Army headquarters then. It'll need to be analyzed so it can become part of our fighting force." Akame decided to speak up, educating Tatsumi and Naruto on other goals of Night Raid. "Well, we are an assassination team, collecting the lost Tigu is one of our submissions. When we run into enemies who possess a Tigu like Zank, we take them, even the weakest of them are invaluable." Akame spoke in a finger raised like a teacher. "The more we have, the stronger the army becomes or something, right?" Tatsumi spoke, scratching his head and slowly recovering from the energy drain. "Correct, you and Naruto should read this book of known Tigu." Tatsumi opened the book to see a vast collection of Tigu. Inside he could see Mine's, Akame's and Shear's Tigu already. Naruto peeked around the side and also began reading, curious at what dangerous Tigu he would encounter. As he looked, he saw the boomerang spear Tigu inside, wielded by the pirate. Appears he got lucky as it had other abilities. "Speaking of, which is the strongest Tigu?" Tatsumi spoke, looking away from the book and directly at Negenda. There was a brief silence before she spoke. "Their use and compatibility change, but if I had to say, the ice manipulation Tigu is what I think. Luckily for us, its user is currently busy conquering the northern tribes." Negenda spoke low-key and remorseful, with her prophetic arm reaching out and covering her right eye patch. She was in deep memory. Rabak then began a long explanation of the north, but Naruto wasn't paying attention, instead was focusing on the words ice manipulation. He remembered the town that was destroyed southwest of the empire and the frozen river. Was the very same ice manipulation Tigu user there? If so, he was truly lucky to make it out of there alive. He had seen how strong the people of the empire were, and if he hazarded a guess, the generals were comparable from A-rank to S-rank ninjas. From the strong presence he could feel from the center of the capital, the ice user could range into the SS class. If you want an explanation, read final comment. Rabak continued talking as Naruto remained in deep thought. They are strong and even have their own hero. Numasika, hero of the North, prince of the northern tribes. With his spear in hand, he's never lost a battle. A brilliant tactical genius who the northern people have absolute faith in and currently the empire's greatest threat. His army uses the country's most fortified city as a base of operations. They've even become strong enough to invade the empire. Therefore, in order to keep that from happening, the empire dispatched an expeditionary force to subjugate the northern tribes. What if Naruto is neglected by family? Akame ga kill end here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.